Welcome, everyone, to the Planning Board meeting of Thursday, November 30th. A note that the meeting is being broadcast and recorded. Calling the meeting to order at 7:19, and the first item on our agenda is the clerk's report. Kate?
We have received 3 public correspondence since the last planning board meeting.
Are the microphones working? It seems quiet to me.
Paul, are the mics working?
They are. Can you give a little more volume?
It-
More volume on it, so you can hear them. All right.
Let's see. Yeah, that just sounds better. Okay. All right. Thanks, Kate. Next on the agenda is time for public comment. Peter, if anyone has public comment, can you manage that?
Sure. Sure. Currently at this time, there's no public comment in the room or on the Zoom platform.
All right. Being very efficient this evening, moving on, we're on item 4, public hearings. The first one on the agenda is 400 Cedar Street. This is a special permit application for T-Mobile cell phone tower. Peter, can you give us an update on that?
Sure. So this past Monday, I had a conference call with the applicant and our consultant, Greg Eldridge, and we reviewed the structural engineering letter that was submitted. We went through the 5 points. There was no issues, and the applicant structural engineer was going to go back, make changes to the plan, and then resubmit those just for final check, and then we'll receive a letter from Greg Eldridge. The applicant, in talking with myself and Greg, thought it would be a little bit tight on timing to present a full plan and a full document, a full package, I would say, to this planning board tonight. So therefore, they requested a continuance to December 14th. I fully expect on December 14th, they're going to come back in with a fully signed off plan from Greg Eldridge, a structural review. And then at that point, we'll have a decision to look at and to vote on.
So basically, everything there seems to be resolved between the applicant and Greg Eldridge,
Yes.
who's reviewing it. It's just a matter of making sure that everything is documented in the drawings. And then I think you had started, or maybe had seen one first version of an approval document.
Yes, you have. You have seen a draft, and so that has been, the approval document has been put together at this point.
So do we anticipate any changes in that draft from these discussions?
No, at this point, I have no changes except any updates to any material that I receive and or a final letter from Greg Eldridge that will be added into the documents of record.
Okay. Then I would just ask, maybe we can just resend it out to the planning board so that we can all review it before the 14th, so that we have any, whatever conditions or anything else we want to put in there, making the assumption that everything else is going to come through, all the Ts crossed, all the Is dotted, and that maybe we'll be able to wrap that up. I did want to say that there was a letter that came into a consultant, and it had Kate's name on it, I think. Did everyone get that? I thought it came to the planning board.
So it came to the planning board, I believe, and it was addressed to Kate. So I did have a conversation with the consultant, and sorry for digging through my slew of... I had that. I apologize. I have it. It was underneath everything. Yes, so there was a letter, and it was submitted by EBI Consulting, and it was subject to invitation for comments on the cell tower. Now, I ended up having, I called the applicant, Adam Braley, the attorney who's been working with us, and I kind of just said, hey, what is this? Because I've seen them before, and I think I've seen them for different other cell towers. And this comes from, it's called a NIPT report, NEPA, and it's from the Section 106 of the National Historical Preservation Act. And so with this, and any project that has to be submitted through the FCC for licensing, they have to do a NIFTY's report. And so this is just a process that all telecommunication towers have to do, and this is almost just a procedural application in a letter that they have to send to us. It was addressed to Kate because she's the clerk. However, it is just an element of their process in licensing through the FCC. It was mentioned to me from Adam that during relocation, and this is considered a relocation project because they're moving the antennas from the top of the tank to the side of the tank, this is an element that has to be looked at and submitted to the FCC for review. And so it's not always done when you're just taking an antenna down and putting a new antenna up using the same brackets, same locations. But with the relocation, this is triggered and it's looked at and it's going to be submitted to the FCC.
And it's,
So, just a quick question. So what is the objective of that? Is to verify that it's not on the roof of a historical building, or what is the objective?
So a couple things, and I'm just going to read from, I Googled Section 106 NIPT report, right? And it's linked to a law that was passed in the 1970s. And it requires federal agencies to access whether a major federal action has potential to significant effects of human environment prior to making a decision. And it says the agencies evaluate environmental and related to social and economic effects of their proposed actions. And so I don't know how this affects actual cell towers. You know, there's been towers and antennas on this water tank for a number of years. You know, there's already been a 20-year lease that has expired. So I know for at least the last 20 years leading up to today, from 2003 onwards, we're going to have antennas on that tower. So I think from my standpoint, what I've collected with a conversation with Adam Braley, this is a procedural element that they have to do, that the applicant has to do with the FCC and telecommunication towers. Other than that, I don't know what else the government is looking at regarding this procedure.
And is that because the tank is old? Like, and so it triggers a historic, because they don't know, maybe it's a
I think that's
historic
one of
tank.
the elements. Yes, it is a historic tank, and it's a change in licensing, especially with the relocation. That's what I've been able to collect. So I've seen these before. I haven't really questioned them too much. The applicants kind of, when I started looking at it, I think it's really just kind of a check the box type of a procedure that they have to do with the FCC licensing.
I don't remember seeing one before because we dealt with other things on this tank, right? And I don't remember seeing one before, so I assume it must be the move.
We did have one. There was another water tower. I forget the address, but I went by and looked at it and took pictures because we did get one of those. And
One of those same kind of letters? Oh, I don't remember that one.
It was like early on, though. It was like kind of that whole investigation about historic and does this belong here?
Okay.
I don't know if anyone did anything with it, but we did get one.
Did everyone get that letter? I don't remember who it went to. I thought it went to the planning board, but it was just today, I think.
It was
Or
yesterday. I have a paper copy right here if anybody wants to look at it.
So, any other questions? I mean, obviously, they're not even really on our agenda tonight. I just wanted to mention that because it came to the planning board. Do you have any questions, Anna?
Nope. I make a motion to continue the 400 Cedar Street special permit applicant T-Mobile Northeast LLC to December 14th, 2023 planning board meeting.
I'll second that.
And before we take a vote, the deadline on this has already been moved to December something, 15th, or the day, I thought we moved it to the day after our meeting.
I believe, yes.
So that's something we want to, but I guess with any continuance, that date gets automatically pushed out.
That it's going to get automatically
Okay.
pushed out.
Okay.
And I've had a very good working relationship with the attorney, so
Okay,
I don't foresee any issues.
all right, then we'll go ahead with the roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatak.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcel Barjona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So that is continued.
I do have a comment, so it wasn't about the continuance, but one point when it was like the 15th, we a little bit put ourselves in the bind about like signatures and like if there are changes to that decision. So I think we definitely want to ask for an extension to the applicant. Do we have to take a vote for that or anything? I mean, I'm a big advocate of not making it the 15th if we're having a meeting on the 14th.
I think we made it the 15th last time.
Oh, I understand, but now
yeah.
that it's moved to the 14th,
Oh,
I don't think we want to put ourselves in a bind to say, I have to button it up, get the entire decision correct, and get all the signatures by the 15th.
What date would you propose?
I mean, I think we need a few days, right? And I assume there's going to, I'm not sure we're going to get the decision, like, the timing with new drawings and the dates changed and all ready to sign that evening, I guess, is what, I think that's
just looking at
not
dates.
entirely possible.
Can we see about moving it a week later to the 21st?
There's some time for if like Peter needs to make changes, edits, and then we need to sign.
I mean, I agree, I would rather have it that evening, but I don't like to.
No, I see what you're saying. So, can you just check into that, Peter?
I'll email with Adam tomorrow. It's not a big deal.
So that we just have time, like I said, if we need to make, just to make sure it's buttoned up, I guess. Okay. All right. All right, then next on our list is 9 to 49 Homer Ave. Peter, do you want to see who's on for today and
Yeah, so tonight.
give us an update?
Sure. So obviously we haven't seen this project in the last two meetings. However, kind of a lot's happened a little bit behind the scenes. First and foremost, in your packets, you're going to see a GCG review letter. Furthermore, sharing with your next door neighbor will be a full 11 by 18 printout of the proposal that was submitted by the application team. And furthermore, you will see a memorandum submitted by the attorney, Mr. Terry Morris, which is a response to the DCR report number 3 with planning board comments put in by Tricia and Marcelo. With that said, tonight on the meeting, I do see the application team of Terry Morris, Rick Salvo, Ron Bork, and I apologize if I'm missing a team member. However, that's what I can state. I think the letter from GCG was a big thing that we were looking for, and obviously after our last meeting where we kind of discussed this element, we were talking about the colors and the color palettes, and we asked for a warm and a cool tone, and that's what we kind of have here tonight. In front of us, I think we are looking to confirm the color selection from the applicant. But at that point, that is the full update I can give, and I would like to turn it over to the applicant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Terry Morris. I'm an attorney representing the petitioner here this evening. And as Peter Matchak has explained, the two members of my team, Ron Bork, our project architect, and Rick Salvo, our project engineer, are on screen with me. If I might, with your permission, share the screen, I think we could use the DRC memo number 3, for which I prepared a response to the most recent markup done by you, Madam Chair, and Mr. Iona, as a template for proceeding to deal with the issues in some sort of order. I think that's useful because many of the answers that would be supplied, that I supplied in the narrative, will actually be illustrated when Mr. Bork presents his most recent set of plans. So if I could share the screen, that would be appreciated.
Peter, do you want to, can you share a screen?
Most disabled. Okay, let's see, here we go. This is the memo in question, Design Review Committee Report number 3. We responded only to those markups that, as I said, were done by the chair. The first such item appears on the second page, actually, and it is 1A3. Massing and scale. We have expanded the plazas at the building recesses to provide flexibility for the use of the undefined tenants and the community. As we had explained previously, the site furniture can be more easily relocated as needed without reconfiguring the permanent landscape in the future. Then the next item that had a comment in green was the item 1-B.1, and that is a request that we present two materials, which we will be doing once I turn the screen over to our architect, Mr. Bork, who will present those materials. Item 3B1, which is as shown on the screen now. The issue there was making the central white pilaster and black aluminum storefronts to be copied on all the storefront bays with the brick material accent on the rear ground floor. We have accomplished that, as we'll be seeing again when Mr. Bork presents the plans. The next comment was under item C, sustainability, and that was item C, 1C2. There was an obvious comment, we must meet or exceed the current stretch energy code, which of course that will be done when we file a building permit application. There was a notation here that the fire department requested no EV chargers be in the underground or covered parking, and the planning board was to review possible solar panel locations. We are prepared to present that as well. I will provide you additional information, however, you will find that the situation, there was a question about the number of spaces that would be service spaces that would be serviced by EV stations. We have located the stations in 3 different places so that they would allow for the installation of 11 charging stations that would be capable of servicing 22 of the 24 surface spaces. The next item was under D, 2D3, historic, heritage and historic details. Item 2D3, and we scroll down to that, bring that up, and that is 2D3. I got ahead of myself. Here we are. There was a question about an interpretive historic mural or signage that would tie the pocket park to the history of the train station. Our response to that is that we are prepared to engage the Historical Commission on just how an interpretive historic mural or signage on the existing stucco wall of the commercial building at 15 Homer could tie the pocket park to the history of the train station. And we will be exploring that when we go before the Historic Commission for the removal of the 2 buildings of the buildings on the site. The next items have to deal with landscaping, and under landscaping, item F involved item F1, F3, FG, let's see. There was a recommendation that we provide an environmental impact study and that be conducted on the site. Our response to that was to submit a document that was actually a risk management review document, which I can also bring up on the screen. I'm going to switch to share now, share screen. Risk minute review document memo, bear with me. From the planning board. Well, apparently I don't have that readily available, so I'll come back to the report. But what I will point out in that document that was submitted to the document that was submitted was a a risk assessment analysis. It was that the telling feature of this document was that it was required by the Needham Bank, which is the lender financing the this project. The report that was commissioned by the bank examined, although it does not meet the standard of a typical Phase 1 study, nonetheless, they did look at critical factors on the site. The report states that the ED environmental screens did not identify any regulatory listings for the site. However, there was a number of regulatory listings that were identified at off-site properties situated in close proximity to the site. These included several abutting and/or nearby auto repair shops and a gasoline station at 15 Alden, 29 Alden, and 61 Homer. The report goes on to say that none of those are expected to impact the site based on the nature of the listings found, the response actions completed at these properties, and/or the anticipated groundwater flow direction. The report goes on to talk about the buildings that were actually constructed on the site between the 1800s and 1960, and the uses that were to which those buildings were put. In every case, they were either residential or commercial retail purposes, including a 3-car storage garage. The report states that the buildings are heated by either natural gas or fuel oil that was stored above ground. There were no known underground storage tanks or USTs on the site, past or present. Finally, the author says that there's no indication of any high-risk businesses ever being located on the site in the past, for example, such as a dry cleaner, or of any fill being brought to the site that could be of a contaminated nature. And then it also noted, looking at the 1937 Sandboard Atlas, try to get some greater history of the site, that the site was improved at that time was improved with several buildings that were used as residential dwellings and commercial storefronts. Again, uses that in no way indicated the potential for hazardous conditions. So as a result of the assessment and research undertaken, the conclusion was, based on the information presented, the environmental risk posed to the bank, who was a lender, as I said, of the project, in its role as a secured lender is low, and there was no recommendation of further assessment of the site at this time. So that was the documentation that, as I said, was presented to the bank before they basically engaged as being the lender for this project, and that is what was available to us, and we've shared that with the board. Back to the DRC report number 3. The next item was that in item 1G1, pergolas at the rear seem out of place and too small. Benches located at the sidewalk should be maybe be under the pergolas. The space is not quite usable. Our response to this was that the relocated site exit includes the ability to provide adequate outdoor seating due to the higher volume of traffic. In lieu of a lawn, we are proposing a larger landscape bed with shrub massings, which will be shown on the landscape plan when presented later on. Next item, IG2, question the materials of pavers at the Pocket Park. Our response was that those pavers at the Pocket Park will be the same as the other hardscapes along Homer within the building recess. The next item was item 1G4, and that comment was talking about the hardscape materials being used, and we have commented that the site hardscape to use material, we will use materials that are consistent with the Main Street renovation project. Brick pavers will act as an edge and transition material similar to the downtown. An additional material of gray ashlar stone we feel is appropriate to sensitively relate to the historic train station, and the gray ashlar pattern may be used as the primary field material within the plaza areas and building recesses. That brings us down to the landscape. First comment was at item 1H5. And that comment was hard and soft landscaping to be reviewed by the DRC. We note that we will show that we have added 2 additional trees along the west property line, which are to match the trees on the south property line. Going to item 2H1, that was a question about the critical root zones for the plantings. Our comment is that critical root zones will be added to the erosion control drawing, and also tree protection in both the landscape and civil drawing sets as well. This item we expect to be included as a condition in any order prepared by or presented to the planning board for final written decision. Item 2H2 talks about the pocket parks. The idea here was to create a consistent streetscape. We have agreed to add a tree at all of the inset plaza entrances, centered, and increase the permeability of the pavers or grading surrounding these landlocked trees for optimal growth. Item 3H1, again, dealing with the pocket park. We've agreed to add, as part of our effort there, to make everything is consistent, add in another particular species of tree, a Betula nigra, so that all of the plaza parks across the front of the building present a unified presentation. Similar permeable paving is to be used to accommodate the landlocked trees for the front of the building. And lastly, the last comment is under item L, and that is which is identified as pedestrian access and bicycle accessibility. Item 1L.2. Maybe I have it. Yeah, I might have L 1.2. Bicycle racks. Public bike racks have been moved to the edge of the sidewalk with easy access from the right-of-way, and they will be shown to be screened with planter boxes from the functional area of the plaza spaces. This concludes our response to the DRC report number 3. And now I think it's probably useful if I turn the microphone over or the screen over to our project architect, so he may further illustrate some of the conditions that I've already outlined in this presentation. Thank you.
Just a couple questions, and maybe just the things that aren't on the list before we do that, and also if there's any planning board questions. I noticed that in item that the list goes from D to F, and that E is missing. And E had to do with signage on the site, and the design review committee notes here, and I don't think we got to talking about this last time, that they were looking to, I think they were saying that the sign, and maybe we can talk about this in the image, that the signage location as indicated is acceptable, but they had also talked about fonts and colors of signage to be deferred and reviewed prior to occupancy. So I want to make sure, as Deepa knows, in the past, we've kind of tried to stop deferring because it comes back that you have to deal with it later. On the other hand, I'm not sure maybe we'd be ready to confirm signage, and it also sounds like it says signage guideline study is underway. And so I assume that means the design review committee is maybe during this quieter period is starting to really study signage, which they had always intended to do. And so I just wanted to throw that out there for the board, how we want to address that when we get to that place. So it's not necessarily a question for the team right now, unless you have thoughts on that. The other thing I wanted to note that was under item, I think under L for some reason, was that there was a comment about the pergola at the pocket park next to the existing building, and that pergola has been removed. Is that right? To allow more room for green space? There's not a pergola.
That's correct.
There,
Ron, is that correct, Ron? Ron?
Across from the train station, no, the pergola has not been removed. It was really a cover for the seating. On the other end of the site, where the roadway leads to Alden Street, that has been removed.
Okay, so that's something we can to see
So-
I'm trying to see where I read that now.
So I was just going to comment on your point about signage and whether we want to take that under our purview. It seems related to the condition that's offered by the applicant on the signage or mural on the stucco wall of the commercial building. And the suggestion that that being something that's a component of historical commission opining on that. Assuming that we agree that that's the proper entity, maybe the signage up front should be similarly situated into the same category altogether, so that there's some consistency between the input that we receive from the historic commission, if we agree that that's the right entity, about one area and the other together. They seem interrelated to me.
Yeah, I guess, my question is whether we, do we take that on, or do we?
If we decide not to take it on, I think I believe it's appropriate for us to take it on if we as a board are prepared. In other words, why wouldn't we, if we're talking about color, warm, cold, why wouldn't we also talk about signage, right, and how that fits into the building? But what I'm suggesting is if we feel like delegating the task, it seems like extremely related and would be well paired with the mural task.
Any other comments? I'm not sure how to handle it at this point, or if,
I see it a little differently. I think if there is one item that is worth deferring to some other study, is this one. I remember talking to the design review committee at one time in one of our meetings about it, and they expressed the interest in creating some standard for the downtown, just like they did with the historical signs that were installed around. And I remember somebody in the design review committee was, I think a graphic designer was interested.
Hannah Stein, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we said then, and I still believe is the case, that is a well worth endeavor, and I wish that had been like completed by now, before we see other projects in downtown. I think that this could be easily resolved by putting a condition that forces the applicant to use whatever standard has been reached at when they before the occupancy permit, because we don't have the standard created.
Mhm.
Nobody, unless they are working on it, have been working on it. So we probably need to find out. And that standard should if they are doing that, I think they should do it in concert with the historical commission, and that's where these two groups can definitely come up with the font and materials or whatever is appropriate. And then we apply it to every project that.
So that Anna's comment gets integrated into that, because it's really about signage around Ashland, not just signage for this project and that.
Yeah, in that way is not just the historical commission, but the design review committee with the historical commission coming with a standard for what is appropriate within the historical district, which typically in every town, it makes sense that there's a different character, materiality, and
So the only challenge is there has not been, as far as I know, a definitive definition of the historic area in Ashland yet formally, right? So that may take some time. It may be part of the comprehensive plan, et cetera, et cetera. So I feel like we need to at least give design review some guidance. Hey, design review, whatever you're doing, we like it, keep doing it. Please prioritize downtown, prioritize this building relative to downtown.
Yes.
Come up with something that applies to this building that may be useful to downtown, that can be later integrated into the historic district. But I feel like we need to give them some push and focus so that we don't lose sight of the fact that we need an immediate answer now that applies to this project.
I think what you just said makes total sense to me. The direction should be, I mean, it should be deductive. The downtown should be primary, because applies. There should be a logic to it that gets applied to everything. But this project will be the first one to implement it. So we have the urgency, and I agree with Anna. Maybe we need a direct request. Design Review Committee and Historical Commission, can you please help us develop this standard?
Maybe, Peter, maybe we can draft up a really simple memo to the design review committee, as we've kind of done before on other things, just about this project, about it relating to signage, and kind of putting that, they've already indicated that they assumed it would be coming back to them, but the, what to look, the things we talked about, what to look at, about certain urgency, with it to make sure it happens.
I think from what I'm reading here is the only thing that's in question is the font style, because the lighting has been approved as is, as shown in the rendering. So it's literally the font and the color. It's probably, the scope of that signage in this particular project is probably metal kind of a thing. I don't know if whatever that material is, it's not, it doesn't feel like it's a huge lift. It feels like it's a matter of just choosing a font style for those. Because they have the location indicated, they have the lighting approved, it's just literally the font that we're talking about as signage element in this project.
So does that sound like a good idea to kind of create the memo, and we can send it out to the planning board? I assume it'll be very, very simple memo, but just so they have something in writing about that this is kind of, in their court, and we're looking forward to seeing what they come up with. So, okay. Unless there's other comments, I'll turn it back to.
So are we taking comments on the design review report number 3 and the applicant response? Is that what we're on still? Because I do have a comment, but I can wait if.
Yes, we're still in the design review comments, but we were now going to look at it in context with the colors and images. But if you have something.
Yeah,
still
so
that.
the 1F3, I think that was 1F3 about the impact study.
Mhm.
So I feel like that, first of all, it says review with GCG, and I recall that we had loosely talked, and that there are some concerns about underground parking garages. They get built all over the world, right? This isn't something new, it's new to Ashland, but it's not the simplest of construction either. So my interpretation of that was, and we have a civil division at my company, I talked to them, and there are some concerns of like settlement of adjacent structures, dealing with the water table and construction. Like there's some pretty particular things, and done wrong, it actually could have some issues with adjacent structures. So my take of that was about that kind of environmental impact, but so 2 comments related. That says planning board review with GCG, and there's a couple other in here that says planning board review with GCG, and I'm not sure if that did happen yet, or how that's in the works.
Yep, I think mostly to clarify, most of what we were doing right now is going through the design review component of these things having to do really, I think, more with design. But you're right, there's a whole bunch of things that say go to GCG,
Mm-hmm.
but in the GCG report, I have a whole bunch of circles on mine of
There's a bunch
unresolved issues.
Unresolved issues, yeah.
Right, so I think it folds back into those, and we'll have to kind of cross-check, kind of some of those issues. So I think we're focusing a little bit on design right now, but I agree with you, there's a lot of things with the parking garage and heights and stuff that don't seem to be resolved,
Mhm. So I think and also, I think correct me if I'm wrong, none of this stuff we received this evening we sent a memo, I think it got sent to the applicant about our sort of list of open issues, and I think we didn't get kind of a response about that. Like most of those are still open from the current stuff that was presented for tonight, right?
I have those open issues somewhere in my pile here. Oh, thanks. I checked off mine, though. Yours aren't checked off. So there are some in here, and I'll find it in my pile, and we can go through that as well when we finish looking at the slides. But I think some of them we have gotten responses back
Yes.
from, like, the fire chief and from some different things, and other ones we haven't.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay,
So-
We have another document which I think was produced by Peter Matchak's office to the board, dated November 1st. We can bring that up on the screen if you wanted to use that as a template.
We can,
I was merely commenting, I believe, one of what was presented about the environmental impact was quite likely not what was intended, but it had GCG, and my only other comment is anything in here that said, talk to GCG to please make sure it doesn't get missed. That, I'm good otherwise, yeah.
yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think, Mr. Morris, I think that the November 1st is the date on that memorandum that is just the list of our ongoing issues, so. And maybe that's something GCG, if they haven't commented specifically about it or reviewed it specifically in their review. Yeah, I made a note here on mine that that's a question that can go back to them. Is this already accommodated in what you're looking at? Or is this something you hadn't considered? I assume it's always been in their minds because they seem to be pretty thorough, but it's good, and it would be good to know it explicitly, so. So you're saying GCG has already seen the environmental studies as presented by the bank's environmental study? Okay. So Kate is saying that there may be some questions beyond that, the design review committee was thinking about it in a little different way, and that's maybe what we want to ask GCG. Because that environmental impact study can mean a lot of different, I could define that a lot of different ways, right? So, okay. So, little delay, but I think we're back to the presentation, if you wanted to continue on.
Ron?
Yes.
Ron, do you want to present the architectural drawings?
So what I'd like to do is to start with, instead of running through the entire presentation with all the renderings, just make note that all of the renderings have been updated to reflect these materials. This sheet in your booklet is actually slightly different, and I apologize, I picked it up yesterday that it hadn't been updated to show this material, which is what the rest of the model shows. So I'll send this out to Peter so that you can have, for record, an accurate set. But essentially what this is these are the colors that were noted in the materials and texture 1B.1. And I've noted, what they are. So essentially it's consistent with the rest of the model. So that said, I'd like to go to the issue we had, or the comments on the entry plazas. And as Terry noted, we've updated the model and the plans to show that additional tree so that there's some consistency in the entrances. We've added bike racks to the fronts, so they're directly accessed from the sidewalk, and then you can access into the plazas from there. Where we have tables, that could be interchangeable with the location on the right as well, depending on who the tenants are. So there's a little bit of flex space there. And the brick material that's shown at the sidewalks is consistent with the material being used in the downtown. So that becomes our sort of our linkage to the downtown work that's being done. And on the plan, you can see that we've added the planter boxes, as Terry mentioned, flanking the bike racks, as well as recess the benches into the landscape a little more. And that was primarily the comments that were made regarding that section of work. And there's a couple of other issues. One was, if you look at the lower left image, that was brick at one time in an earlier version, and it was suggested that would be more appropriate to have a similar storefront as the other bays. So we've updated that, as well as updating the model, as I mentioned, for the landscape. So that was the scope from our last discussion. Now I'd like to just backtrack somewhat to discuss a few of the items that were that were discussed regarding the train station and the pocket park. So this has been around for a while. I mean, we talked about it and explained our materiality, and then the idea of a mural on this wall, this face of the wall, came up. And as I was thinking about it, the pergola that's here really makes this a three-dimensional mural, because essentially you'll have a historic look similar to the train station with the backdrop of whatever historic mural wants to be put there. So it kind of gives you a unique perspective on that mural, where you're actually inserting it into what could be very similar typology to what the train station is across the street. So I know that there's a discussion about removing it, but I'd like you to consider that, because I think it could become a unique feature to this site. I do like the idea of the mural. I think it's in a good location, and I think that it will be very telling to you know, the relationship to the train station. But I think we can add another element to that as well. So as far as the landscaping, we revised the landscaping from the comments that were made during our last design review meeting. And unfortunately, Julian can't be here, but you know, the plant types and the species and everything are consistent with what that discussion was about. So I really, this isn't my discipline, so it's very difficult for me to talk about, you know, what exactly these plants are and what, you know, what they like and things like that. So I apologize for that, but it is consistent with the discussion that we had with the landscape people. And then I'd like to just go back and do a really quick overview of, because the color scheme does, you know, create a different look to the building. So we do have the, you know, the lighter recesses. We have the colors for the shingle and roofing material, which is a driftwood. The shakes are the gray slate, and there's a gray to the siding as well. The brick, as I mentioned, will be similar to what is happening in the downtown area. You can see the consistency here.
Ron, can you just repeat those colors real quick?
Yeah, I was looking at the materials that were written down. So if we look at
The cool and the warm. We're looking to compare the cool and the warm.
So I have another slide that I have to share from a different screen that has the other color palette on it. So I'm just going to unshare this and share that other slide.
This one?
No, night green. That's the roof. That's roof samples.
The night gray is the dark one.
Yeah.
Right. So this was the other color palette, which were more the cream colors. And this is the palette that we're looking at now in the model. And I think we agreed that this palette was more appropriate.
Quick, Ron, can you repeat what you just said? I mean, you're showing us the different option. Which one, you as the designer, which one would you prefer to go with?
I would prefer to go with the what we're showing in the current package.
So that's page 4,
This
just so
one.
we're on the same, so you're talking
Yeah,
about,
you can see my screen, right? So we're
so that's page 4 of your 5-page document.
that's correct, right?
And is that considered the cool or the warm?
This is the cool.
That's the
This would be the
cool.
cool.
And so page 5 is the warm?
Page 5 is the warm.
I think, what we were hoping for, and I appreciate the two schemes, but what we're hoping for, and I think requested, was that the colors are put together like they're put together for us, not for us to have to sort through the different colors, that typically, old school, they're attached to a board. They have a sample of the roof color, not just in a little booklet, but a few shingles that are laid next to those colors. And so that you can, and the brick, we have the brick samples behind us, but they don't seem to match the more orangey brick that's shown here. I think the brick was intended to match the red of the new sidewalks, right? I believe. So it would be an understanding of what that brick was in the sidewalk, and if we have a red that's similar to the red in the sidewalk. So in that you're really looking at it then, and it's kind of old school, but I'm sure you've seen color boards like that, material boards that you just then can look at it all together instead of having to assemble it in your head. So we may be able to get to some kind of direction here, but I still would want to see those color samples all in one place. I don't know, before making a final decision, it's very hard to take a few square inches and put it with colors. Usually driftwood is kind of a little warm and would be pairing it with a cool. It might be fine, but that's my comment on that. It's not making our job easy to have all these materials in these little pieces.
I'm just going to add, I think it's tricky because obviously we understand, I was thinking about this, like when the applicant is remote.
Speaker, speak up, please.
Sorry,
a
this
little.
is Anna speaking. One of the challenges for me is I'm seeing kind of samples here and we're kind of guessing. Like, the planning board is sort of like, ooh, is it this picture? Is it that one? And maybe having the applicant be in the room with us to actually look at this together with the architect so that we can actually not use our imagination. I think that would be really helpful. I just don't think we're speaking the same language because you guys are virtual, we're in person, we've got some samples, but not what we expected. And I'm having a hard time imagining it and trusting it. Like, am I actually imagining what it is, or the color that happens to be on the printer that the printer created? Because I've printed things before in color for my daughter's school projects, and they don't turn out the way they're supposed to. So I just want to make sure that I'm not trusting a printer.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I mean, that's why I'm talking about that this is very old school, right? If you're not in the design fields, is what we used to call a color board or a materials board, where these samples, and you might have a few samples of trim, you might have samples of whatever you're going to use, would actually be attached to a physical board. And that would be one palette, right? So that you could look at the board and you could see all the colors next to each other. You wouldn't be looking at a little square of the roofing in a thing. You would get a roofing sample from the company and you would put those on the board. And so you get a really good picture of how those colors work together and overlap with each other. All of us have seen it, right? And it just makes that job of you don't have to imagine the colors. And this is before the day of the color printer, right? That was way too expensive. So, but it's still the best way because they are the actual colors. They're the actual materials that are going on the building. And that's what I do think. It's still incomplete for that level of decision.
And just to be clear, like I'm looking at what the warm is on our table and looking at what the warm is behind us. And unless I'm colorblind, they seem very different.
I think that's part of the confusion because if I look at what's printed here in front of me, what's on this screen, and then what's on that screen, it's the same thing, but they all look vastly different to me, and none of them
versus
look quite
what's
like
on
what's
the table.
Here. Yeah,
like what's on the table actually does not seem as warm as what's behind me on the screen. If we're talking about warmth in the same way.
Yeah, I think that's true. There's kind of an oranginess.
Yeah,
to
exactly.
what's on the screen.
Which I really don't like. But that warm on the table isn't too bad.
Yeah, it's toned down.
So I'm just like, ooh, I kind of like that. But if that's what it's going to look like, no way. So, do you know what I mean? Like, so I'm having a hard time not to be, like, I want to be flexible, but I feel like we need to get into the same room with the architect and actually understand what is this actually going to look like? Like, can we trust what's on the table? But you guys are not even here to look at what's on the table. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, so we go old school, we provide, 2 color boards, one warm and one cool. And, because I mean, in my mind, I understand what you're saying about the image on your wall, because your projection system is different than a computer screen. It's, it's the color, it'll come out different. But I think the value of the models and being able to put the materials on, versus, simply looking at a color board, definitely has its benefits as well if the colors are accurate. And these colors that I put on here, they're the formula, right? They're the RGB colors from the paint samples, the paint chips from Benjamin Moore, whoever. So I guess maybe it's a combination of the two, but if we need to do color, we need to do the panel boards and come in with them, then that's what we'll do.
I mean, I think it's either that or, and again, I'm not sure, I mean, if we want to do this, or it's doing a mock-up at the site where it's built in place, and then the decision is made at that time, where all the materials are mocked up. That's a common way of doing it too, so that you can see them on the site, at the location, at the time, before any actual materials are decided, or any actual colors for those materials are decided. But it has to be the material, because even if you're using the exact paint sample, our monitor here can be skewed toward the reds or skewed toward the blues, right? It's just
Absolutely. Yep,
part of the
I agree with that.
technology.
I mean, I have to say the warm appeals to me, the warm that's on the table. But looking at printed material or the 2 screens, I like the cooler much better. So like, I'm confused. And I do think it's beneficial to look at the warm and the cool standing there. So I can see the benefit of that as well.
And I think what we're seeing here, I think thanks to Trisha, she tried to put something together with because we probably didn't have all the names here, but a lot of materials are missing in that. Like obviously your pavers and that brick has a strong definition even on that elevation. So I think we should, it doesn't even have to be a board, as long as the 2 palettes are properly put together so that we can look at all the materials, because there's so much going on in this 15 feet distance. There's a lot of materials happening, different textures happening. So I think it has to be at least put together as one complete palette versus the other, versus seeing bits and pieces of the 2 samples, because like you said, that actual brick sample, paver sample is so different than what you are showing as rendering there, that is really dark versus what you have on your rendering. So I don't know if you have seen those samples, but it's a good idea to put the 2 palettes together. And then your suggestion of doing it on site is great, but I think we should narrow it down.
Yeah.
Because we've had challenges with having something go up when we are not ready for it. So I think we should have something narrowed down. It's great to look at it during daylight versus looking at it this warm light. I think that's also playing a lot of role in what we are seeing here. So if it means we are at the site with 2 cool palette and warm palette and look at it there for 10 minutes and disperse, that might be a way to go.
And I think you're right, it doesn't have to be nailed to a board. Those get very heavy, but it has to be easily
And it'll
put
help us
together.
to move things
Yeah.
around, especially
Yeah.
the roof colors are pretty strong, so.
So does anyone have any comments about color, knowing that are you leaning one way or another? Any comments, any other information to give the applicant while they put these things together?
No, I was just going to go where Deepa went, and I think the problem of making these type of evaluations at night under this light is the wrong way to go about it. I think having a board would be helpful, or a tray. I mean, we do it on trays as well, but bringing it out to the sun is very important, because you're never gonna get the right color under this light. So I think it has to be brought during daylight or left here on some sort of board and tray for us to swing by and maybe have a quick review with the presence of one of the architect or somebody on the team and see it outside.
Yeah, and you know, as far as the roofing color, you know, you can get the, you know, the palettes that they're all one roof color. It has a handle, you can take it with you, you know, and you can get several of those. One in driftwood, which I think is a bit warm, but there could be other samples as well that you can really look at them with these colors instead of you just can't tell with the small samples, you know.
Yeah, and what's catching my attention is I don't know if the intention of that glass is really to be that blue that you're seeing here, or is it low iron glass? I'm not sure what that is. So having that sample also will help. I don't think you are intending to have blue glass there, because some of the rendering is showing as if they have a color tint to it. So I think you should get all the samples in that elevation, because there's too much going on.
The only other question about color, and it's related to color, but not to the samples, but I wanted to make a note of it. When I was looking through the other elevations, and maybe this just hasn't been updated yet, but we keep looking at this front elevation, but then you look at the back elevations, and are they still all one color? Like, is that I think on the ones I saw, like the back elevations, once you turn the corner, everything was just beige. And we're going to want to see all the elevations. I'm not sure we're looking for, I mean, I think hardy plank is the same color, or it's the same price no matter what color you buy, I believe. And so I think it's important to understand if this is just pretty on the front and gets neglected on the back. Maybe it just hasn't been updated.
Or where the transition is, if it is intentional.
Or it could be simplified on the back, you know, maybe it's not as, you know, maybe it's not as complex, the palette, but it seemed to be a dramatic difference when I was looking at it.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I know the comment was made in passing, but there was a suggestion that this project could be handled in the way many projects are handled, and that is, at that point in time, when the building is up, but before the materials are chosen, that you actually have models on site with the brick, with the clapboard, and you have them on site, and you make that decision at the time of construction, rather than going through at this time. I mean, at least you're guaranteed that whatever colors you choose at that point in the process will be exactly what you want. I think there are a number of issues which you have identified, Madam Chair, as saying with the GCG report and other things that I think perhaps we could spend more time doing that than going round and round about colors when we know the colors can be handled at some later point in the process.
Yeah, I understand. It's just that, and that's why Deepa said that maybe we need something to put in there and then can look at it again later, because we did have a recent example, when Deepa and I were on the board, maybe Marcelo, maybe it was, you weren't there, where we waited and the wrong colors were put up. So, and it was supposed to be verified by the planning board first, the wrong colors were put up, and it just turned into a mess. And so we would rather not be in that position again, and thus, I think we're probably favoring making a decision that we're pretty sure of at this point, or that we could be pretty sure of at this point, rather than kicking it down the road where things do happen and have, so. So I don't think necessarily we need to do that for the 14th, in 2 weeks, if that's not on your agenda to get that together. But I think before the end, I think we do need to see that. Is there anything else on the renderings that you wanted to review tonight? I think there are a few other things we can go to relative to the status of our checklist. Oh, Marcelo?
Just a question. Both the attorney and the architect described some of the changes that were done to the landscape, or, you know, being responsive to what we asked. Is everybody comfortable with those changes? I want to make sure that the changes were made in response to comments. And if we all are accepting those changes, then we can just move on to just the materials, and at least we narrow down the list for next.
I think that's a good point. So I'll just comment, I'm pretty sure our new sidewalk has a brick band, and I think what they were showing, and I don't know what we can ask, was all concrete, and the brick was like more toward the entrance. So it's not, it's maybe speaking to it, but it's not replicating. And I think we were originally asking, I believe it was even in the GCG report, like really hone that down. Is it going to match or not? In fact, you were the first one to bring that up.
Yeah,
right?
but I think that there's different conditions
Yeah.
depending on the width of the sidewalk. Peter, there's conditions where it's wider and there's some planted area, so they put brick there too, right, Peter? But there's other areas where it's narrow enough that it's just concrete, right?
So if you walk around town, you'll notice the banding is not, the brick is consistent. The width of the banding is not because of different features. So looking on our side, the town hall side of Main Street, we have the planter boxes, right? And so there, the banding is much wider than on the other side of the street. Now, if you walk on the other side of the street, which I'm gonna call the south side of the street, which is near the memorial, the fallen soldiers memorial. So I believe that brick banding is only about 3 to 4 bricks deep, right? And so it's much skinnier on that side. And on that side, you already have trees, and so there's really no planter boxes on the southern side of the street. When you get around to Pizza Mine, which is the abutting property here, that sidewalk is so skinny between the curb and the building, there's no brick banding at all. And so as you cross the street, I'm gonna say from the post office across Main Street, there's the dentist, Zen Family Dental. Of Zen Family Dental, there is a bump out that has some brick banding with a tree in it, with a tree planting box, and it's, I'm gonna say, it has brick in that element, but then as that sidewalk narrows down and takes that turn, there's no brick. And so moving down the sideway here, there's no more brick on that curve from the curb in between the curb and the building.
So that means that the brick is going to reappear on this property, that when it gets a little wider to the right of the concrete before you enter the palette of those patios,
Correct.
right? So,
But it would be on the building side and not as a trim as along the street, yeah. Which may be appropriate for the width of the sidewalk. The sidewalk's the sidewalk and the patio's the patio, right? One's town and one's privately owned, so. I guess I would just to say that would be, given that should be, if there, it should just be taken a second look at and make sure that that's the appropriate solution. And it very well may be that is the appropriate solution for this area where this thing turns the corner and then continues off into whatever neighborhood, that maybe that is the appropriate solution. But to have images of that corner as it's finished and, to kind of prove that point, I guess, would be my suggestion.
Yeah, the brick banding, and I'll double check tomorrow. But the brick banding is really limited to Main Street. And it may go down Front Street a little bit towards the library. But even in front of the library, there's no brick band. There's limited brick banding, and I think it's more around the tree boxes and the bump outs for the crosswalks.
Yeah, maybe so we can just get some images and.
Yeah,
if,
I can.
Then.
Not a problem.
Yeah.
I can get some images and just circulate it around to the planning board. That's a
So-
pretty easy
See
solution.
the continuity of how it is, because right now this feels like more patchwork of brick in this, because we're trying to force that
Yeah.
connection. So I don't know if it is powerful enough and really helping us connect. I don't know if you'd walk down from Main Street and turn around the corner, whether you'll say, hey, I saw that brick band there, because there's a start, stop in this scenario. So if you're forcing an element it doesn't work. So maybe to just take photographs of certain patterns and how it starts and stops, or is it a continuous band? If there's some logic in how that was created, to copy it into this.
So I appreciate, I mean, that's sort of, I don't know enough about design. I told you I'm the adult who wears animals, right? But I do notice those things, and I appreciate the comments, and that was early on. So I think that, in my opinion, is not settled, especially when experts weigh in.
That's a good
But
point.
I do believe, in my opinion, all the other things about adding a tree, moving bikes, I believe those are settled. So I would support
Yeah,
those
I
being
agree with
settled.
that. And I will just add that maybe there, I think what Deepa was referring to, that you go from a concrete to a kind of a patch of brick and then to the other material. I mean, there's an opportunity there, especially with what has been done on these changes, where you could create like a frame of those patios that is brick, that really kind of holds the character of the downtown. And then inside that frame of brick, then you can put the new material, which is part of the project. So that's another way, because right now it's just like a wide band in the front and stops, it looks like.
Yeah.
But that's another way to do it. So I guess I would agree with Kate. I think everything else, I like it, all the changes. I'm all set with all those. And maybe this can be given one more look.
Sorry, maybe it'd be good to have a diagram of the site with no vegetation, just the paving pattern. Would that, so we can just see how it, but yeah, I agree that, I mean, I went through the design review list, and besides the few items I mentioned about the signage, the pergola is still in the drawing, so I'm not sure where that design review comment, came from. That I think all those have been checked off and taken care of, and took the design review committee suggestions into consideration and applied them to the project. So I think we all appreciate that.
Could I ask a question?
Sure.
So this discussion about the sidewalks, I'm a little confused. So is the sidewalk that's being part of this, not our, part of the street work, is that brick, or has it ended and become concrete at that point?
That's our question, and we think it's concrete.
It's
Right, so if you have, Peter, if there are drawings that show the layout of that, I'd be more than happy to update the model to show that accurately.
Okay.
If there is brick patterning in there.
Yeah,
And
Peter-
maybe this project affects how that brick patterning is set up.
I'm happy to take pictures, and obviously, Ron, I'm happy to just, come out here. If you want to come out and have a cup of coffee, we can walk
Yeah.
around, and you can see the brick patterns and how it kind of, everything is now turning down, down Homer, because right now, the downtown is complete, minus the removal of the telephone poles, which is really an Eversource, which is really on Eversource to make the underground connections, and then the above ground wires will come down. And so, but from a hardscape perspective, you can come out here and you can see the final product.
Well, I was out a few weeks ago and I did see it. But my question is, the construction documents for the street, do they show brick paving patterns on the sidewalks, or is that something you guys work out separately?
I think the construction documents do show paving patterns. I cannot confirm that is what was developed. And I think there's more brick, to tell you the truth. There's more brick that was first proposed within those construction drawings than is actually installed. Number one, the island that runs in the center of town, that was supposed to be stamped concrete, stamped asphalt. That was taken out, and then the bricks were laid in because of the appearance. The appearance of as first proposed was really not acceptable to the town, and so that was something that was done on the fly, and I believe was done with great success because it looks much better than it did.
But the
As two
existing limit of
designers
scope-
nod their head, but yeah, so I can provide you with those construction drawings.
Yeah, because so if the existing limit of scope ends at the pizza place, for example, what was scheduled for this side of Homer Street?
Well, nothing because the project ended.
Oh, the project ended. Okay, so this is a clean slate.
Yes.
We don't have to worry about somebody putting a sidewalk in and then working with that. We can actually create, okay, so
No.
the comment Marcel made about, I think what you were getting at was to draw the brick out onto the sidewalk, so it becomes sort of a welcome mat to the plaza.
I think
right?
what-
Yeah, no, I guess the comments were that, the way it's laid out right now, it is almost just like a horizontal band, and you walk from a concrete sidewalk onto like a brick strip, and then onto another material. So it's kind of a weird, like 1, 2, 3 transition, whereas in the town, the brick and the concrete you really talk to each other nicely, and it's different on different parts of the street. What can be done here to introduce the new material that you are proposing, which is that paver, would be what we were saying is potentially surrounding it and creating a frame for that entire zone on the brick, so that it's a more natural transition. That would be one way to do it. Maybe there's other ways to do it. So I like Tricia's suggestion that once, I think once you review, the drawings or come and look at the final product yourself, we could look, and you have a little part plan that shows the patios, and we can just use that and just show, maybe after you see it, maybe you yourself would have an idea of what you think enhances your design better. And
Okay,
then
fair
we'll look
enough.
at it.
Yep, I agree.
I think the other thing we can, unless there's more questions with that, but the other thing we could go through tonight briefly, I don't think it'll take long, is our our November 1st memorandum kind of checklist, just to kind of get a sense of where those things are. So the first item on that list was the environmental impact study. We already talked about that. The next item was trails, and the questions there was really to GCG. Does their review take the trail into account? Is there any other safety measures that we should put in place now for a possible future trail in that area? The traffic impact study, I don't think we have any additional information on that. Peter, did you find out anything about the apartment egress requirements? About those units?
I talked to our building commissioner, and he would, as they apply for building permits, he would have to require a distance measurement to make sure they met code. And I believe I talked to Terry and Ron about this, but that was going to be looked at.
Okay, as part of.
That was being looked at. And Ron, I don't know if you have any update, and or Terry, but there was an emergency egress distance requirement that was going to have to be analyzed with the entrance and exit for those 3 units off of the, I'm going to say roof garden.
Right, yeah, no, I did look in the ICC code, and we can egress onto a roof. It's a fire rated assembly, and it takes you directly to a right-of-way. So I can cite the reference,
Okay.
but I'm confident that that's not an issue.
Okay. Did you do a distance measurement?
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So that
We're
may
full
be
spec of building, so
requested
we get some bonuses
later,
in.
but
Yeah.
just so it's on everyone's radar.
Okay, yeah, in a sense, it's a little bit, out of the realm of the planning board. It was just brought up, and it's a code thing, so it's better to be brought up now than later.
I agree.
Next was emergency vehicle parking space. I believe we at least got feedback from the fire department that said they had no problem sharing the space with deliveries, as long as it didn't become a permanent parking space for someone.
We can post a sign indicating temporary parking, certain limit.
Yeah, I assume it'll be crosshatched or something like that. I don't think we've heard back from police yet. I don't think there was anything from the police department, but there was a letter from the fire department.
Yeah, I can concur that we haven't received a letter, but vocally I've talked to the chief and there was no concerns.
Okay. maybe we can just get that in an email or something. Thanks. The sewer grinder pump. So you had talked to Greg Eldridge about
You have
that.
two emails. You have two emails from engineering, I think, Madam Chair.
Yes, I have them in front of me, but I'm asking Peter about his conversation.
So this is an interesting one. I think number one, what it comes across to me is that right now it's not part of the town sewer regulations. Number one, so there's no regulations in the town of Ashland that call for an apartment multi-use building to install a grinder pump for the action of grinding and or the event of grinding wipes, diapers, whatever is flushed down a toilet. Now, it was brought up by our water and sewer department because from time to time, and you know, things do get flushed down toilets, and they get put through our pump stations. Our pump stations have grinder pumps in them. And so really, that's what it comes down to. Is our pump stations have grinder pumps in them. People throw some very strange things down toilets, right? And so, but we do not have any regulations that call for any multifamily unit developments over X number of units to install a grinder pump to chop up any foreign objects before they enter into a public sewer. Now, the sewer and the water department are going to look at regulations to update their own regulations to call out for some of the, to hopefully tie this loop. However, at this point, we don't have anything. Now, it's a novel idea I've heard from a few folks, but I've also heard from our consultant that he's never heard of this being installed in a gravity sewer. And so I'm conflicted, because is there an issue? Do people throw crazy things down toilets? Yes. However, we don't have any regulations, and for us to create a condition, we do need regulations and or evidence that something negative could impact.
So I want to find out, I think that was the question, can we? Because my read of our jurisdiction is infrastructure about projects, right? So to me, it's critical, this is infrastructure about a project that affecting. And the engineering report said, so this is a difference than a single family home, because you're having multiple things end up going through one connection, right? So this is a different condition. And so I think we do have to go, are we allowed to? Just because we don't have a regulation, that may be the answer, then we're not allowed to, and we know. But I don't personally want to assume, because there's no regulation, that we wouldn't be allowed to consider this. I think, so what happens if now there's housing there, right? There's 4 apartments sending things to the sewer, and it's gonna be 29, right? That's a potential impact to the community that may potentially be have a mitigation for the project for it. So it's under our jurisdiction to consider it if we are allowed to consider it. And that may be the simple answer, there's no regulation and we can't do it, but it may not be.
Marcel?
Yeah, I totally understand what Katie's saying, but my comment to this last time or the time before is that I feel that the request cannot be arbitrary. And if the authority that governs the sewer doesn't have that regulation, there's probably a reason, or maybe they will reconsider that, okay. But as it stands right now, it doesn't exist. So I personally don't like, even if we had the authority, which is really a good question, I feel uncomfortable just pulling out of the air ideas that are not regulation to put on projects just because we can. Just because we can doesn't mean that we must. And I don't like the procedurally a board like ours throwing like requirements that have not been proven by science or engineering or the authorities that regulate that system. So I don't believe that that's the site as a whole, yeah, the load of the sewer has been calculated, has been engineered, and has to be, because there's codes for that. And the building inspector and the authorities would have to approve it. So I just feel a little uncomfortable trying to, I see the validity of maybe this system, but maybe it's not needed. I mean, there's billions of buildings that don't have it, and the sewers still work. So I feel uncomfortable just because we can do something that seems arbitrary to me still.
Anybody else on that topic?
I mean, without seeing legal counsel opinion, I'm not sure we lack jurisdiction. If there is a expert technical finding, which I believe there is, that one would be advisable, and you have a multifamily building that is putting extra pressure above and beyond the norm onto our infrastructure, which is a public infrastructure, I do believe our bylaws allow us to create conditions for a special permit project, which is this one, relative to infrastructure. So I, for one, would like a legal opinion, actually, from legal counsel to say that we cannot have this condition before I say I'm uncomfortable.
Anybody else?
I kind of second what Marcelo said. If we may have the power, but if the team, the experts haven't asked for it, have not foreseen a requirement in town, knowing that there are so many multifamily projects coming up, I personally don't agree that this is a requirement that we should suggest to the design team.
I think, Amanda, did you?
I mean, I was going to echo Anna's sentiment that I think the threshold question is, can we have town council look to see whether or not it's even something that we can consider? And then, you know, if we have, and then sort of address the merits, basically, is my thought.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question in general for town council, like where do the limits of our authority, where do we step into gray area? Because we have been doing that once in a while, as you know. So that would be good to understand on a question like this. But I also think that, you know, 501 Pond, 100 Chestnut, they both went through technical reviews too, and this issue never came up on those much larger projects. And so it does seem a little strange to plug it in on 29 units to me. Yeah, it seems a little odd. But for question one, you know, the first question is, can we even do it, I guess?
I mean,
We may have missed it in
and
the other projects.
Yeah, and I think if everybody gets smarter or learned something, or they went to a conference, I mean, this is not coming from this board, this came from the technical review. And then there was an independent we asked for, the engineer said there is an issue, and he literally says, put the costs where they belong with the project. That I think going backwards of something that was or wasn't done is not an applicable kind of bar for this.
I understand. Hold on a minute. I understand, but I think it's more about like, to me, it seems like that they're wondering amongst themselves, like, hey, should this be a regulation? Not, yes, we're going to push for this to be a regulation, and we've already done the homework, and we know that this is true. It seems like something they're putting out there as, we need to look into this. And that's the kind of gray area I'm not sure about being a test case for. So, Anna?
Well, what I was going to say is infrastructure cost. So, you know, I think that our town planner is sharing that we already have this mechanism technically within our system, right? So my question would be, can we get confirmation that the multifamily use here is not going to have any impact on that infrastructure? That whatever infrastructure we already have can handle it, and it's not going to be financially cumbersome or somehow damage our infrastructure. So if we have the mechanism, I guess our own grinding systems that are going to take care of this, and there's not going to be any impact, then I would not have any concern. But I'm not hearing that. So that's the other kind of way to handle it. Obviously, legal counsel opinion is always helpful and educational, and I think we should get it in general so that we know where our line is for all projects. But I'm also very curious if it even makes a difference. Like, even if we
I
have,
want to talk, but I don't know how to raise my hand.
Yeah, so I think we just need some more information in two different directions about this, and then we can go from there. So, I'm sorry, I see two hands raised, or maybe
Yeah,
one
so
hand raised.
the first hand raised was Terry Morris. Attorney Morris, would you like to say something, please?
I would, now I know you don't, I know that I'm not unbiased because I represent the petitioner, but I have had experience not only as an attorney, but also as a permitting, in the permitting process, municipal and state permitting process. So I'm somewhat familiar with what administrative law requirements are. I think the bottom line is you're professionals. The people in your engineering department have, the situation has not risen to the level where they feel that you need to adopt, the professionals need to adopt a regulation to deal with this. And until they do, I don't believe it's appropriate for you to apply this condition. Because as Marcello said, it could be deemed to be arbitrary and capricious.
Yeah, I appreciate your comment, but again, as I've said before, the planning board's going to rely on our own experts and our own legal expertise.
fine.
And so we'll go to those sources and then we'll come back. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying we're going to lean in the direction of our own people, and then we'll come back for a discussion on this or to make a point on it. Mr. Zamuto, do you want to make a comment? Charlie's hand's raised, but.
Yes, Mr. Zamuto, would you like to make a comment, please?
Charlie, you there?
Okay. All right, so we'll get back to that. It's not being decided today. Next on the list is Conservation Commission. I don't believe that isn't in process yet, I don't think, right?
Hello?
Mr.
Oh, now he's there.
Charlie, would you like to say a few words?
Hello?
Yep, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Right?
Just have technical difficulties.
Can you hear me, Terry?
I can hear you, so everyone else can too, Charlie.
Hello? You all there?
Yeah, we're here. Speak.
Oh, okay. So I built several buildings, and I've never had a city or municipality ever ask me to put a grinder pump in for a storage system. We built 65 units, and some of them we never had to do it. I've built, we're probably close to 100 units in Framingham now. They never asked. Marlboro has never asked. I could go on and on about all the cities of the big apartment buildings we've done that are much larger than this, and they'd never asked.
Thank you.
And
Yep, I appreciate that. It's just that, the question has come up, and so we're asking. We're not asking you to do it. We're asking that we're going to be investigating it a little further, and we're not going to come up with an answer today,
so is this just for us or for every project?
No, it's just a question. It's a question that came up, like, should this be a regular part of what we require in Ashland? It just happened that it was mentioned during the technical review, and so we're following up on it. That's all. It's nothing to do with this.
Who mentions it? Just for my information, who mentions it?
The Water and Sewer Department.
And they asked for it, or they just asked
Well, I think
about it?
I think it's an idea. No,
Okay.
and that's what it is. And I think I think we are trying to thoroughly flush out the idea to see if it can be, no pun intended. I didn't even mean to do that. If it could be and or should be applied across not just this project but any future project.
Yes, let's not panic about it now. We just want more information. We want more information as a board. We're trying to just understand this point.
let's
but we're
flush
gonna-
through it in the
What?
future.
All right, but Conservation Commission process has not that's not started yet. Okay. Color schemes, obviously, we're working on those. Design Review Committee report, I think that's basically done, except for the things that are about GCG, but that's not the Design Review Committee part. That's the Planning Board part. those are, right. Concert,
Minus the signage.
yes, yep, minus signage. So most of those items are being taken care of. Conservation, the plantings, I believe also most of those were addressed on the, in the design review committee. They were swapping out some plants for others. They were swapping out, native species maybe for others. There were little swaps, and there was something in there. I think they suggested, the applicant suggested that it be put in as a condition that everything has to be off the suggested plantings list, from the town, the conservation agent, and things like that. So I think all of those, they were fine making those changes.
I think that, I mean, I would agree with that assessment, but I think the last from the conservation agent was a little bit open or confusion maybe. So what you said, I agree, and if it's all taken care of on condition, then we're fine.
I can go pull those things
Yeah.
out. Again, I was reading through them before the meeting. But yeah, they seem to be taken care of to me, but we can double check that. Sewer capacity, I think we have confirmed that our water and sewer consultant, that everything is,
That thing saying your hand was still up.
that everything is good. I think it is in writing, but we'll have to pull up that document. That was, yeah. I don't have that one in front of me, but we can have that in writing. The water flow test, I think that was also complete, right?
That's typically, I have confirmed that there's no question that this section of town, actually the downtown has the highest water pressure in the downtown, and there's no evidence that this wouldn't have enough water flow to it, but that's something that is typically conditioned within an approval process.
All right, and the swept path analysis was looked at by the fire department, and in a letter, he thought one part of it might be a little tight, but he was okay with it. Was basically the gist of it. And the technical review, in relationship also to fire, he also said that this fire sprinkler connection, that's not on this list, but it was mentioned before. He said he liked the location where it was being shown, on the corner of Homer and Alden, because there was a fire hydrant across the street. And then finally, the technical review, that we're looking for a response for all departmental comments, but I think a lot of them are already integrated into this list. Can we double check that to make sure?
I believe so, but I'll double check.
Yeah, I think we already integrated them, so. All right, any further questions? That we will be continuing to revisit this list, but we're chopping off pieces of it.
I think, just so we don't forget, I think we were expecting this to be complete, but we may have to add the GCG final review to
Absolutely.
this. So, because I think it's a good process we established. We probably should start at the beginning doing this, we'll open things next time, but just add it to this list, I think.
Yeah, I think that can be obviously at the top of the list, because I think you and I both commented that going through the GCG list, there are lots of resolved, but there are also a lot of things that are not resolved. And some of those things are planning board waivers, and maybe next time we will, as a board, focus on those things that GCG is saying, planning board to approve, planning board waiver needed, or conditions, that's right. So maybe that would be a great thing to focus on next time.
Was this project having solar panels?
It does have solar panels, and I think Ron mentioned that they
Had a layout?
had a layout.
Sharing?
It's in here.
Oh, it's in the packet somewhere.
Visible on sheets.
If you can see my screen, you can see an image looking down on the roof.
South facing.
Yep, south facing.
Thank
Not
you.
visible from the street.
Do you want to do that now?
Sure. And Terry, I just want to make a note. I know I see Rick on the call. Rick, do you want to jump in and provide any comment or color on where things stand from an environmental standpoint? I know you did receive the GCG letter, and I know Terry noted in a call that you were looking to set up a call with GCG to go over outstanding issues. But do you want to add anything to this conversation?
No, I do want to do that. I mean, I think the majority of a lot of the GCG issues have been addressed. I think we're down to a couple of just fine technical issues. And I think that, you know, with a phone call or a Zoom meeting or something, or even in person, I'd be happy with. I think we can address the rest of the remaining comments and be able to get the clean letter that we're looking for out of GCG.
Okay, so in your opinion, the GCG letter that was dated, I believe, November 21st, there was no red flags or hurdles you believe we can overcome?
No, it's just, you know, there's multiple ways we can address it. I just want to talk to them to figure out the best way to address the comments. There was nothing that was insurmountable in that report.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm happy to work with you, and obviously it's good to see you on the call.
Thanks.
All right, does anyone have any further comments before we try to wrap this up and continue? All right, so I think what we will be looking at for next time that we discuss this is that we will be looking at the GCG items. At minimum, we'll be looking at the GCG items that they pass back to the planning board and go through that list. We'll look at the colors if we have what we need. I'm getting a little tired of keeping going back to colors without the information that we need. So we would then be continuing this to, we only have the 14th before.
Yeah, so looking at the meeting schedule, our next meeting and our only meeting, in December is on the 14th. Then we're going to jump into 2024. Still scary saying that, but that we're going to meet on the 11th and the 25th at this point. And so I think we're looking for a continuance. And at this point where we stand, probably beyond, we're looking for a continuance into the new year. And Terry, please weigh in on your opinion. And obviously, we need to talk about extending the date of the decision to be filed with the town clerk. So I think we're happy to extend the public hearing to December 14th. If I obviously reading the room, but I think the decision date needs to be moved out to at a minimum of January 25th.
No, I think the decision date needs to be moved back to a minimum of March 1st.
Okay.
Because
March 1st?
yes, because as soon as, even when we get through all the GCG stuff, all the color stuff, all these other things, we're still going to be having to go through conditions and go through an approval document if we vote to approve. And that takes quite a while. That's not going to happen in a couple meetings. And so I, for one, am a little tired of just kicking this 2 weeks, or a month. I want to give us, I want to say March 1st. I don't want to deal with this issue again. I want to be slightly realistic that we can reach that point. So I'm looking for somewhere around March 1st, and then we'll see if we get it done by that time. Any comments on that from the board? And I know that might be frustrating, but there have been a lot of delays, a lot of postponing and delays here that have not been in our court, not in the planning board's court. And this is just a date that we have to keep kicking down the road, and it's starting to annoy me.
Terry, is this acceptable to you, representing the applicant?
I'll have to discuss the matter with my client. You and I can confer with it before the next meeting. We will certainly, we need to discuss it. We're certainly inclined to do it, but it's probably best if I don't say anything more this evening.
That's fine. Where's the date currently at?
The next date's December 15th.
No, I mean, where's the date, the deadline date at?
December 15th.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's where it stands right now. The decision, if it wasn't if it was an agreed upon by the applicant December 15th, we would have to file a decision on December 15th. And obviously, Terry, you and I can work together, but in the meantime, the planning board will have to take action to make sure that we're protected. And we'll go from there. But obviously, 2 weeks gives myself plenty of time and to do what I need to do to protect the town and the planning board if that extension is not granted.
Well, I think we could extend it to, like you said, the first meeting in January at this point, but I want a discussion to happen about a more realistic date. You know, because when we continually meet and we don't get the things that we need to meet about, that's just not in the planning board's. We're not slowing down this process, right? And I'm just getting tired of dealing with this date every other meeting. So,
One of the key things that I'm reluctant to commit to a specific date at this point is a lot of time was spent discussing this issue of colors, and I have to confer with the team to see whether we're in a position to give you what you want in 2 weeks, which will obviously impact how far into the new year this goes.
So Terry, I think what
Terry,
was
we'll-
offered
we'll-
by the chair, if I can say this, and please step in if I'm wrong, is that if we could continue this out to the first meeting in January, which would be the January 11th, so that'd be January 12th, that would relieve myself of writing a decision, in preparation for the meeting on the 14th to vote on, which probably wouldn't be in the favor of you, the applicant. So in my mind, if we can continue this out to a minimum of January 12th, that would at least open up the conversation and the lines of communication to talk about a realistic date, which would move into March as suggested by the chair.
Well, we could certainly agree to a continuance to January 12th without any further discussion. That's not an issue.
okay, so let's continue to January 12th.
Okay, let's continue the decision
11th.
date to January 12th.
Was that what it?
Yeah, the
And we ex-
hearing's on
we-
the 11th.
Okay.
And then
We fully
we'll continue the public hearing until December 14th. And obviously, you and I can work together to concur that you will be able to provide information, obviously, regarding the colors. And then I'll work with Rick to set up a meeting with GCG to kind of tie down continue to tie down some of these loose ends. But I think
That's a positive suggestion. You know, the chair is right. There's been a lot of delays, but the frustrating thing for us is GCG is a moving target. We that's one of the reasons why we can't commit to, have trouble committing to a specific time. We have no guarantee that if Rick meets with them, there won't be something else. But I don't want to delay this any further. We'll agree to January 12th or whatever it is, and I fully expect that we'd probably have to, before then, extend it out somewhat further. But we appreciate the time you spending on this tonight. And Madam Chair, I want to make clear, we're very appreciative of the time you spent throughout the many months that we've been here. We're almost there, and we will keep our heads down and keep running towards the goal line.
Can we get a clarification? Are we going to try to do a site visit for the colors or not? Did we agree that we want some kind of panel that we ourselves will carry out into the sunlight, or are we actually going to try to do something in person with the applicant? Can that be clarified?
I think given that sunlight is before 4:30, that's probably not going to happen. But I think we could have. I think we could get the colors and we could bring them out. We could have either alone or together.
Yeah, I think if they are provided as we have requested on a board or on
Tray.
an assembly, then we can organize with Peter ways
If
to
I have,
come see it on the outside or whoever
Okay.
can go to the
Yeah.
side. But we need to have it in an assembly altogether, clearly organized. and that'll do it.
If I have the boards, I'm here in town hall, obviously, I'm happy to meet anybody, in the morning, myself and or Alvaro are happy to
Right.
meet anybody, from,
What I'm suggesting is, can we ask the applicant to give that to us sooner than later, so maybe we can try to do it by the 15th of December?
if that's
that
doable on
it's-
the application team, I'm sure they would, and I'm speaking for now for you, Terry, in the application team, but if that's doable, I think it'd be great to receive something.
Yeah, so why don't I work with Peter to kind of make a more descriptive, definitive, what we want as far as these samples, so that it's extremely clear. And see if we can get those in advance, so that we do have an opportunity to take them outside. And, and all of us have very busy schedules, but on our own schedule, get to see them in the little daylight that we have, and then we could have a more valid discussion on the 14th. So, okay? So looking to continue this until the 14th, and the decision date would be going out to January 15th,
2024.
2024.
Yeah.
All right, is there a motion to continue?
Yes, I'll make a motion to continue 949 Homer Avenue hearing to January,
December
to
14th.
December 14th.
And a second?
Second that.
Roll call vote?
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So that is continued to the 14th, last meeting in 2023. So Margie,
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, everyone. And Terry and Rick, I'll follow up with you later in the week.
Sounds great.
all right,
Correct.
thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, so next item on our agenda is the discussion with Sustainability Committee, Margie, on the materials that were sent to us on the new tree bylaw.
Yes. So I am going to, does anybody have to take a break? No. Okay. Jump into it. All right. So Margie, I'm going to kind of just go through this memo, and I think you received this. So, and I apologize. Chuck had to leave. So first off, did everyone get to see the memo that was proposed? Did everyone read the memo? Does anybody have any questions?
So just to kind of make sure I read it correctly, what's behind the memo is the most recent draft?
So what's behind the memo is the most recent draft of the bylaw that was provided by Margie. Now, this bylaw, the bones of everything here, was developed back in 2019, 2020, in an effort from our Sustainability Committee and, at the time, our Assistant Town Planner and our Sustainability Manager. That draft was reviewed by Lisa Mead, and then right at the same time, COVID hit. And so that's what kind of put the brakes onto the development of this bylaw. Obviously now, a few years later, we're picking it back up, and I think Margie's made a couple changes to it. However, my memo was put together just to provide some light, some color, some history, some context to tree bylaws in general. So it was put together as more of a comparison document, while the bylaw was something for the planning board to read, to look through, and to analyze.
So can we, relative to your memo, would it make sense, for example, like your memo talks about protected tree, right?
Mhm.
The draft of the bylaw defines protected tree, sorry, I gotta find that one, protected tree as 6 inches. So do we understand your bylaw as being, I mean, I'm just trying to understand, like, your memo relative to the draft, how should we kind of look at the two?
So they kind of
Okay,
they kind of cross-reference each other. They kind of cross-reference each other because, number one, our bylaw is outlined through this memo.
Gotcha.
But it's also, I'm trying to also compare what other communities are doing.
okay,
And throughout the bylaw, we take 3 different communities. And I do want to make a note publicly, Samantha Riley, our Sustainability Committee, Sustainability manager was the one that really put this memo together with myself.
Okay,
And so,
so in other
I want to
words-
give her credit first and foremost for putting this together. But with this said, I'm cross-referencing the memo and the tree bylaw, and I'm also putting a comparison in to say, this is what we're proposing. We're proposing 6 inches. Right?
Right, and 6 inches is what
That's
Arlington and Wellesley did.
Wellesley's 8 inches.
Oh, your memo said Arlington and Wellesley define a significant tree as 6.
I'm
So-
sorry. You're correct.
So is it Arlington and Wellesley at 6?
Somerville is 8.
And Somerville's 8?
Somerville is at 8.
So if we choose 6 and larger, we're doing something consistent with Arlington and Wellesley.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just trying to understand how to read.
And I'm just trying to say, these are the differences between 6, 8, this is a 10-inch tree, this is a 12-inch tree.
Gotcha.
And then
So-
I can also tell you, just for clarification, if you look behind you at the seal, on the outer ring, the blue, that's a 56-inch tree in diameter. Right? So that's a big tree.
Yep, so,
The yellow inner, the next step in is a 48-inch tree, and then the inner seal, which is just the clock, town hall, in the river, that's a 35.5-inch diameter tree. So
So-
I'm just trying to add to say like,
Yeah.
okay, this is what all other towns are doing, but at the end of the day, this is what we're proposing as a major tree, 6 inches.
we're proposing, we're choosing a very aggressive definition of a protected tree.
I would land there. Aggressive is a good term.
Just so that we're all on the same page.
Yep.
So it seems like one way to read your memo is to kind of go through it and see where we as a planning board might have some consensus. Like, where would we be comfortable presenting something to town meeting?
Yes.
Again, we don't necessarily have to all love it, but we have to be comfortable to give it to town meeting so that the public can actually take a peek at it.
Yep.
So,
So on the point of the tree diameter at breast height, though, I mean, I feel like we have to hear from the sustainability, because the whole part of this is over a sustainability issue. And that a 6-inch tree processing carbon versus an 8-inch tree versus how long it takes to grow to that size, I think are relevant. That I'm thinking the sustainability knows more than we do. I did some kind of quick internet research and got that it's actually, I mean, you can say 6 inches, sort of an aggressive definition, but it's not. It takes a long time to get a tree 6 inches.
oh yeah, no,
So-
I understand. I mean, within this construct. I don't mean aggressive relative to the world. I mean aggressive
Yeah, I think
relative to what's in front of us.
into the bylaw. And
Yeah.
the whole memo is broken up into different points of interest, I call them, right? Number one, applicability. How are we, the town, the bylaw, the planning board, going to enforce, quote unquote, a tree bylaw? And also, what do other towns do? So I try to outline
Right,
that,
understood. I think for me, just big picture, what I would love to see is a tree bylaw that we can get to town meeting, and even if it doesn't have everything I love in it, I want it to pass, right? And so I would love 6, but probably 8 or 10 is more likely to pass. I'm just kind of throwing out there a thought, right? And so I, for one, would be happy to start somewhere, see how it goes in Ashland, and make it more quote-unquote aggressive over time. Because right now, we don't have any tree law whatsoever. So I'm just going to throw that out there, that maybe it's not so much about comparing it town to town for me. It's more about trying to find some kind of compromise position as quickly as possible so we can deliver this to our people and see how it goes. That's my philosophical position on this whole thing.
Okay.
Because if we're going to start not arguing, but trying to find the perfect answer to every single problem, we're not going to have a tree bylaw, in my opinion. Because lots of people are going to disagree whether 6 is too aggressive or not aggressive enough. So I'm just going to throw that out there because I think that will help us actually get to a tree bylaw that we can get to town meeting, pass, see how it goes, and maybe 5 years from now, take a more aggressive stance.
Well, what process do we want to go through tonight to get to a better understanding of where I mean, Peter has this memo, but he's distributed it, we've probably all read it. Do we want to start there? Do we want to look at the actual bylaw? Sorry, I keep turning my microphone off. Do we want to look at the actual bylaw and say, and kind of go through that? How do we want to approach
I mean,
this tonight?
I feel like Peter's memo might be a good way to start if Peter can outline, hey, what are the 5 things we need to kind of decide to give direction?
I think
It seems like size is one of them.
so. Size is one of them, right? Big topic, right? I think applicability is the big thing that we need to kind of flesh out. I think number one, and I'm just going to go through the proposal, right? Number one, we're going to say, okay, if you're applying for site plan approval, right? What are the triggers for site plan approval? It's any parking spot. Creation of a parking lot greater than six parking spaces. We have our own triggers in our bylaw, right? So I think also a second element that we have to talk about is what projects are we going to catch? What projects are we going to have to enforce this upon, right? So site plan approval is going to be mostly commercial developments, mixed-use developments, bigger developments of that nature, that scale, right?
But it also applies to subdivisions, as it says.
If we
So
choose
a
that.
So
subdivision.
if we choose that, and I'm gonna
that.
get there, right?
Okay.
Number one, site alteration special permits. That if someone's changing their grade greater than 500, I think it's, greater than 500 square feet, or with 500 square feet of material. Looking across the board, all tree bylaws typically have any change of grade, has that element in there. Then we go into subdivisions. Now, subdivisions, and I look at Margie, because we went around this for a long time. Now, within this subdivision, we are saying this will apply to any new subdivisions. This will apply, and this will apply to the roadway that's cut in, right? That's what we're asking, that's what we're saying
But if
right
the-
now.
But if the subdivision, say, is for, say, 10 lots for residential, for houses, and there's a residential section of it that wants to be applicable only to the setback zones. So in the subdivision, would that also apply, or are we trying to?
So that's a whole different thing. So where everyone landed was that the tree bylaw will apply to the subdivision, and it will apply to the subdivision, to the roadway, the cul-de-sac, right? And so a developer will have to pay to cut down and/or implement and plant a replacement trees for any trees cut down within that right of way. Now, a subdivision therefore creates new lots, right? That's the whole point of a subdivision. So and this is the kind of the second step within the subdivisions, and that any new lots created, this bylaw would apply to. So any new residential lots created via A&R and/or subdivision residential, this bylaw is going to be created. Now, what we also did is we but we borrowed Arlington's plan, right? So what Arlington does, and a couple other communities, especially Wellesley does this too, is that they almost take what in Ashland would be a 30,000 square foot lot, right? And then you minus, then you look at the setbacks, right? The setbacks then creates what's known as the buildable envelope, right? Now, any trees cut down in the buildable envelope are not, are not that are allowed, right?
And that applies to someone that bought a lot on that subdivision, and they can come say, I'm gonna build my house over here. They have the right to
They have the
change
right
that zone.
They have the right to cut down any tree within the buildable envelope where they will put their house. This bylaw is going to enforce any trees cut down within the setbacks. So right now, within the residential A subdivision, 30,000 square foot lot, which is kind of across the board, is that we have a setback of 40 feet from the front property line, 15 from the sides, and I believe 30 from the rear, right? And so that's going to create your building envelope. And so therefore, I believe it was addendum C that was sent out, but also right here, a sample tree plan. And so that was kind of the compromise we landed at. Because, and I will say, I was a fierce defender of this, because I really was skeptical about this, right? But I do want to make note, and I think it's the biggest thing that we have to talk about is, not the biggest thing that we need to talk about, but we need to make it clear that this tree bylaw is not going to be applicable to any lot that was created pre
Today.
the adoption of this zoning bylaw. So, if Marcelo, I'm gonna use you as an example.
Thank you.
Because Trish is sitting next to me. But this bylaw, if you wanted to cut down a tree in your setback, in your front setback, we're not gonna be able to apply this bylaw to you. This is only gonna be applied to any newly created residential lot from here on out, if accepted at town meeting.
Just for
Not
setbacks.
retroactive.
Just for setbacks.
So essentially, when you say subdivision approval, we're talking about just the setbacks areas.
Just the setbacks
And the
area.
road.
And the road.
And the
front.
road. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important to make it super clear
Yeah.
in the draft. The draft
Yes.
should openly say, relative to subdivisions, this only applies, because I know legalese can be really complicated.
Correct.
I think we need to be blatant and clear that this only applies to setbacks and roadways, period, relative to subdivisions.
Correct.
And obviously, the grandfather clause needs to be completely clean. Like,
100%, yeah, it's gotta
Um,
be, and you gotta we have to allow for exceptions for the development of a driveway, right? And elements of that nature, which are
The common
respect,
sense
which are
ones.
common, right? But that was kind of that was the easiest way, at least for me as a town planner, to buy into applying the tree bylaw in Ashland to a residential development. Because.
To a subdivision, you mean?
To a subdivision.
Yep.
But to residential land.
Yep.
Because here's the other thing, right? And there was conversation, you say, and this is what other towns do, right? If you're in Wellesley or Arlington, this applies to all residential homes. So now it doesn't matter if your lot was created in 1950. If you're gonna cut down a tree in the setback, this bylaw is gonna apply to you, right?
Which is what we're doing.
No, we are not doing that.
We're gonna grandfather it.
We're gonna be saying this applies to any newly created lot from this date here on out.
For subdivisions.
For subdivisions?
Yep.
Well, there's only two ways to create a buildable lot, subdivision
Yep.
and A&R.
I understand.
But, so I have a question. So I think, I understand now the process, and it seems reasonable to me, I think, as a point of departure. So what happens if somebody plans a subdivision for commercial purposes? And their whole intent was to avoid clear cutting and things like that. So how, that would not apply to a commercial development? Or if it's, let's say it's a subdivision to put some warehouses, then what happens?
Well, you're still gonna have to build a roadway.
No, the roadway, I get it, but the lots of each one of those commercial entities.
Most likely, those commercial entities are gonna have to file a site plan review,
And then it would apply to
and
them.
then this,
And then it would apply.
then this
Yeah,
would
I
apply
mean-
through that trigger.
So,
Okay.
so this is what I was gonna ask. Maybe I'm kind of like oversimplifying it, but the majority, at least for me, the majority of projects I'm concerned about are the projects we've had, which are site plan approval, where we are clear cutting.
That's,
And so that seems to be the crux of our concern in Ashland, not so much the subdivisions. Maybe because I haven't seen that many subdivisions in my very limited time here on this board, but I'm under the impression that whatever land we have left seems to be less vulnerable. I think we're kind of past the Fafford era, where we're subdividing land and we're kind of creating these new creative chunks. I feel like we're in a new phase in Ashland where site approval is where the clear cutting is happening. I could be wrong, but that's my perception.
no, I think you're right, and I do just wanna make a note to this, because as reviewing all these bylaws, right? Arlington, Wellesley, this, right? And I try to outline this in my memo, right? What they are protecting against is the tear down. The 1950 home getting torn, that's on a 10,000
old-
square foot lot,
Put a
that has
McMansion
mature
there.
cheese on it, right? That someone's coming in, tearing down
Right.
the Campanelli Cape, right? And chopping down every tree on the site. they're putting in a 4,500 square foot house, and they're having to, they take down every
Right.
tree because they have to put the foundation in, they have to work around the site, and then they backfill with a couple trees here and there, right? And so that's what's kind of going on, I kind of see. And when you go through the triggers of the other bylaws, especially in the other towns, that it's the expansion of a footprint, it's a raise and a redevelop of a residential lot. It's a addition greater than 250,000 square feet, which is nothing, right? And/or it's a,
250.
excuse me, 250
That
square
would be a
feet.
big addition.
That's a big
Well,
house.
that's what I'm,
Correct.
I guess what I'm
So-
saying is I
Yeah,
think
it's a
we're
big
past
bathroom.
that. I think
Correct.
Ashland has already been.
So what we're protecting against, which I agree with you,
Yep.
is the site plan approval, is something different than what a couple of the other towns that already have adopted tree bylaws are protecting against. So I feel like we had to take kind of a hybrid approach to say, okay, how do you get commercial, right? Well, commercial is kind of is defendable through site plan approval, right? Now, how do you look at any future residential? Well, then you're gonna have to create this date and say from here on out, it's going from this
I mean,
way.
I'm comfortable with that because I think Ashland has already been clear cut where it's too late to use the subdivision provisions in the not grandfathered fashion. Like, I think we're past that point. I think we're now no longer there. I think thanks to Fafford and other developers, we're past that point. And so we've clear cut enough that to me, the crux of the issue is in site plan review. I'm just sharing my comfort level. So I'm okay with this less aggressive grandfather version of the subdivision piece because I think it's more likely to work for Ashland.
Does anybody else have any?
You know, being someone who regretfully has worked on at least one of those takedowns, put up something much larger. You know, I think we could put something in that protects against extreme cases of that. When, like, the 250 is, that's nothing, that's no square footage, that shouldn't be counted
silly.
anywhere. That's insane. But the tearing down of a whole house and putting up something much larger, I don't think we have to focus on that right now, but I wouldn't be opposed to having that kind of dramatic change in there. Now, in that case, you're really only affecting probably a few trees, you know, because you're probably putting that house right back down where it was to begin with, right? And so, but there could be a few mature trees around there. It's not like you're taking out 20 trees in the middle of your lot, you know.
But so you suggest that you would do that by percentage? Saying if the footprint of that cape or whatever is 1,500 square feet, if you go beyond like 50% more, or would you have to come to a formula that way?
I think I think they did.
Yeah.
You know, but I think, I'm not sure we have to get into it in this round.
Yeah.
But I think Anna had mentioned it before, as it is happening in these other communities. I mean,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, and it has to be proportional because it's not the same an addition of 250 square feet on a little cape than on a large, ranch or colonial, right?
So just there's 4 trigger points in Wellesley's, right? Demolition of a structure with a footprint, demolition of a structure with a footprint of 250 square feet or greater. Now that's a demolition of a structure, right? 250 square feet of a structure.
That's removing a shed.
yeah, that's
True.
nothing, that's no space.
Construction, okay, it's constructing a structure, okay, constructing a structure on a vacant lot, which is a home. Constructing a retaining wall with a height of 4 feet or greater, so that's kind of getting into, okay, site alteration. Constructing a structure or an addition that increases the total existing footprint, lot coverage, by greater than 50% or more.
So I think what they're covering, and what town is that?
That's Wellesley.
I think what they're covering is that when you take out one of these little houses and then you put in something bigger, it's not just the house. It's the landscaping and the pool house and the separate garage. And so that whole
Yeah.
site starts to be affected depending on the thing of the land. And that's where I think the retaining wall comes into there, and because it's not just, oh, I'm taking down my little ranch and I'm putting 150% ranch, back. It's like, that's not the problem, because there aren't trees planted right next to your house anyway. No one, you cut them down a long time ago so they don't fall on your house, right? So, that's not the issue. It's that when you do one of these houses, the project extends into the landscape. So,
Makes sense.
and I don't think it's pervasive in Ashland at all right now.
Yes,
But
that's
it
what I'm
definitely is in
saying.
some of these communities.
Not to be overly practical, but again, I just want a tree bylaw to address what we've seen the most, which is clearing with site plan review. So I'm happy to talk about other things, but I don't want those other things to slow us down.
No, I agree, and I agree with that, so.
So that's one element that I think we kind of discuss, right? And obviously, that's kind of rolls through. The next element in the memo talks about a tree protection plan.
Oh, hold on,
Oh, I'm
Peter,
sorry.
but Anna mentioned the first part was size.
Correct.
And we didn't come to, Anna suggests that we be a little less aggressive, potentially, that's and, I mean, how do we feel about it? Because I understand what Anna's saying. I'm tending to agree with that approach, but I don't know if it's a good one, so how do we vet?
Yeah,
I mean, I'm going to go back to, I think the Sustainability Committee's worked at this for 3 or 4 years, so I know, and
So that's
we
part
should
of
at
the
least,
recommendation?
we should at least kind of have a discussion. I mean, I think we were trying to partner with them, so we shouldn't.
yeah.
People that have had I know a lot of those people, and Trish does, they have boatloads of research, so we should at least talk to them.
Makes sense.
What this memo is just kind of highlighting just the points of interest that we need to discuss as we talk about a bylaw, is we have researched other bylaws, right? The other big element I think we need to really kind of get in, the tree plan is kind of, I think we've seen a couple of really good examples of what a tree plan is, and I think we need to just borrow it and include it within our bylaw.
Yeah, and then looking, like, this is not uncommon on a site survey. Like, site surveyors do this all the time and mark the type of tree and the diameter of the tree or whatever information you
Yep.
want to mark, so.
Another element is very common is tree removal. So any trees that were removed prior to the application of a site plan submittal, it's almost it predates it back, right? So they're saying, okay, well, if you knew you were gonna come in for, if Marcelo, if you owned a a lot of land and you knew in the next 12 months you were gonna submit a plan to the planning board and you were going to, if you were gonna submit a plan, but you went ahead and had a bunch of trees removed on the site, and then 6 months later, a plan shows up at the planning board for site plan review, the planning board in the town says, whoa, timeout. You just cut down these trees 6 months ago, those trees need to apply to what you just submitted. So that what all these bylaws kind of do is to say, they kind of give themselves a 12-month window to go back in time to say, okay, in the last 12 months, did you cut any trees down on your property in the effort to kind of short circuit the tree bylaw? Does that make sense?
In our current draft, does it have
Yes.
Does it have that? So that's kind of a no-brainer. I think we
It
could.
kind of has it. I just want to lay it out there.
Yeah, but that one seems like easy to get agreement and move on and say, keep it.
The next one is mitigation, right? And this is where money comes into play. And so this is where I think it's going to be a very discussion with the Sustainability Committee. But in the bylaw, in this memo, it lays out what is proposed by the Sustainability. And I think Margie can speak to that when appropriate, and how it's calculated. And then we can kind of compare what other towns do and the replacement value of it. I think that's kind of a big element. And that leads into the next topic, is obviously kind of replacement trees. What we see,
And where would the replacement be, if you don't mind explaining?
so the replacement trees,
Where would they go?
so they would, number one, they'd go on the site. And number two, whatever trees that would not fit and or cannot be replaced on the site, the developer would be paying a mitigation cost to a tree
Gotcha.
fund that would be to the town of Ashland.
So it's not
which-
really one or the other. It's more like mitigation, and you can also put some on the property,
Yeah,
and you
so-
still have to pay,
As you
yeah.
as you
Okay.
as you develop a site, you're gonna replant and you're gonna landscape, right? So it's almost you're saying, okay, what's here, what's existing, and what's proposed, right? And it's a mathematical equation to say, and then you're saying, well, how many inches at breast diameter height were existing on the land? How many are going back in the planting plan, and at what caliber? And then what's the difference? And the difference is going to be a fairly, I would say, cumbersome mathematical equation that's going to pencil out into a mitigation fee that would have to be paid to the town.
Can you
And
explain, sorry, go ahead.
there is a ratio too, kind of a replacement ratio. Is it 1 inch to 1 inch? And we see that across, I think, in Somerville and in Arlington. And then in Wellesley, you have 1 inch to 0.5. So for every inch you take down, you're replacing with a half an inch caliper tree. So if you take down an 8-inch tree, you're responsible for replacing 4 inches. And that 4 inches could be split via one tree. I mean, those 4 inches are most likely going to be split via 2 trees.
The sort of a tricky part in this, and maybe it comes into play in that ratio, is that, you know, when you have, like, you know, the area behind my house is wooded, right? And there'd be many trees to take out in there if you wanted to build in there. But in a way, none of those trees can really develop to their potential. Like, if there were fewer trees down there, they would have bigger, better canopies, but they're all squished, right? So none of them, it's not like going to Cushing Park where all these trees really develop their full canopy because they're spaced out. So in a way, there's also kind of this balance factor of fewer trees can actually have better, healthier trees with bigger canopies than packing the trees in there, like in the natural woods behind my house, right? And so I can understand maybe why sometimes the ratio isn't 1 to 1, because fewer trees spread out actually have bigger canopies. I think that's just, you know, they're not overlapping each other.
100%.
So
No.
Can I ask a math question?
Sure.
Am I reading your memo right, that 10-inch tree in Somerville is $4,500 and in Wellesley it's $1,500?
Yes.
Okay, so that is interesting. I'm guessing, I'm just thinking policy-wise, Somerville is more urban, so trees probably mean more. I'm guessing that there must have been some logic to that, because there's fewer trees left.
Yeah, I cannot confirm or
Maybe.
deny.
Right, I'm just kind of brainstorming what that actually means.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
I agree.
understand, like, what is a tree worth, right? Like, at some level, we have to decide that. And so we are not as rural as Wellesley, therefore not as flexible. We've let go of a lot of our trees already. So we may be closer to the urban policy of like, holy shit, we have a tree, we better save it. But maybe we're not as concerned as Somerville because we're not exactly in the city. So we may be somewhere in the middle between Wellesley's perspective of a tree versus Somerville, where it's like, oh my God, this is going to cost you some money. But it may also be the kind of developer that's coming in, right, who can afford more or less, maybe. So I don't really know what they're thinking. Do you know what they're thinking?
I don't know what they're thinking. Number
Okay.
one, I wish I did. Number two, I think you gotta really,
I'm just trying to
I
understand
think
how to
it's a-
read the
it's-
comparison, right?
when
Like,
I read the comparison, right? Yeah, Somerville is urban. It's the most highly dense community in the country, right? I think they always use that fact, right? Somerville is a tight community, so yeah, a 6-inch tree is a big tree in
Right, that's what I mean.
Somerville, right?
It's like a tree.
And so
Wow.
yeah, and also in Wellesley, yeah, and it's less, right? And I think from from a different standpoint, right? You have to say, are we trying to punish somebody if they want to take down a tree and or do something to their lot and or develop on their land, right? So you're saying, okay, are we trying to punish these people? Are we trying to but on the other hand, I also do know that, and I've worked for a tree company before, an arborist when I was out of school. Cutting down a tree costs a lot of money, right? And so if you were going to cut down a tree, right, it can cost thousands of dollars, right? And then you try to tack on another another invoice, right, to the town of Ashland or to the town of, example, Wellesley for this, to say, okay, you're going to pay $3,000 to cut down a specimen tree, and also you're going to pay the town another $3,000. So now the removal of that tree is not just going to cost you, is going to cost you $6,000, right? And so from a policy standpoint, which this bylaw is, it's a policy, we have to say, I think it's kind of, you have to really kind of thread the needle to say, what type of town are we? Yes, we value trees, but also, do we want to punish somebody if they're going to change something on their property? And also, how much is a tree? And I think that's what Margie's trying to kind of tried to point out in this is trees are expensive. And trees are expensive, number one, right? And tree work is expensive. Removing trees is expensive. And so it's a huge price tag that you're putting on this. And we don't want to I don't think towns are in the business to make money.
Oh, yeah, no, and I certainly don't disagree with you, and I don't ever look at this as any kind of punishment. I think it's about our values as a community, and if we have a value of protecting the trees we have left, I would argue that actually adds to our value and potentially makes us more profitable to come into, to develop. In theory, if anything, we're rewarding developers because they can then come to a beautiful place where renting an apartment becomes even more pricey, and they can charge more because you live in a beautiful green space. I think there's a reason Wellesley apartments are expensive,
And I think
because people want to live in green spaces.
There's a pro and a con. Because
So I don't know if it's a punishment.
But it can become one.
It can become one because we talk about affordability.
I tend to agree with Peter. What I like about all the work that has been done is that it is setting up an objective. And I think being consistent with the objective is more important than anything else. So in a replacement condition, what is the objective? The objective is to have more trees rather than less trees. If there's a replacement where a person can cut a tree and then plant another two, like the example you gave, I think then the objective would be fulfilled. Adding fines and things and additional regulations is overbearing, and I think it's very easy to put on a piece of paper. And the impact is that it just may not pass, right?
I mean, I think make the replacement easy. Make the
Exactly.
replacement attractive and easy.
Simple.
So that you're motivating the value of our community, which is, I think we're valuing trees more than collecting fines. At the same time, some people may simply find it easier to write a check and not worry about figuring out the perfect tree to plant. And so I can see that can be efficient as well.
That's a hypothetical. Maybe somebody will do, maybe not. That's difficult to pinpoint, right? And by the way, just before I forget, under applicability, there's 4 bullet points. But I want to go back to one that I think is missing. The town of Ashland needs to be also part of that on public work, and it's not there.
Mm-hmm.
And I've said it before. I think the town has to follow by example, by showing that the
Doesn't
town.
Site plan review cover that for the town
So
project?
site plan reviews, like the school project would be site plan
Yeah.
review.
How about a road maintenance that has some trees or something?
So
It happens sometimes. We've talked about
Very
trees on a
good po-
road
no,
that is public.
very
and they
good
wanna
point.
Take it out.
And what I've seen across the board is tree bylaws do not take into account what's with the scenic road. all the tree bylaws that I've seen leaves the scenic road, which is section, I believe, 87, whatever the state statute is, section 15, it totally leaves it alone.
Oh, we can't touch it. It's state law.
It's
We
state
can't like
law.
overwrite state law.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so they kind of.
That's not going to be impacted at
I
all.
agree with you, Marcelo, that yes, we should obviously, as we cut down trees on scenic roads that have seen better days, right? We should replace those trees. And I think a tree fund could be used to help do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think just as the scenic road statute and the shade tree statute of Mass General Law they're never cross-contaminated with a community.
But I think you're
bylaw.
talking
that's
about
not- that's not
other
what I meant.
roads that are not scenic, like,
Scenic-
You're talking about, okay,
whatever the state, I'm not
Okay.
interested in.
All right,
saying like that. I'm saying that any work, for whatever reason, even if it doesn't have to be highlighted here, is if the town, in town property,
Cuts it, okay.
has to cut a tree, it has to be there has to be the applicability and the remedy should also apply.
so you're talking about adding that protection, like the protection we have on scenic routes, where we take a tree down, we replant it. You're thinking of expanding it to all other roads in
Any
Ashland?
public property. I mean, you talk about values. I mean, what better value to show the values if the town actually has to pay to do that too, so it's not cavalier, that, oh yeah, we're gonna chop that tree, but the town is not
And you're
covered by
thinking
this.
of doing that even if it's not a site plan approval, just like any reason, anytime?
Well, the bylaw is to get better trees in Ashland, I mean, that's part of Ashland.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Just
an interesting
I
idea.
agree with you, but I think that's more from a policy standpoint. Like,
Yeah.
That's a policy standpoint, which
But
needs
that's
to
what
be.
this is, isn't this bylaw policy?
So essentially, you're
You said
proposing,
it.
you're proposing,
I did.
so you're proposing a paragraph that would basically say, you know,
Public
part of the
work.
purpose is to lead, and any town property that has a tree of this size, this would apply to it,
Yeah,
regardless of whether it's a special
Sure,
permit or not.
yeah, we don't even have to phrase it
Yeah.
that specifically, it's just added to the applicability. One bullet that says.
Public
any
property.
public property or the property of the town of Ashland, except whatever covered by the state.
I
applies.
think as long as all the exceptions still apply, like safety, you know, whatever
Of
the
course,
exceptions
but
are,
that's in it already.
that seems reasonable
Yeah,
to me.
there are exceptions
Yeah.
that were
Yeah, I saw
kind
it.
of boilerplate, tree safety, X, Y, and Z.
I'm just curious as to, like, and I have no idea what the number would be, but, and I don't, maybe it'd be possible to go back and do an analysis on it. Like, what if this had to be done for the Mendez School or the public safety building, right? I mean, those are projects that I think the community would deem that were essential for Ashland, right?
Yes.
And what would that dollar value be? I mean, granted, especially in the case of the school, they planted a lot of trees, right? And they're still planting trees, I think. Maybe in the public safety building, there was a little less opportunity for that. I'm not sure. But what would have been that bill? What would the bill have been? You know, and
The same bill that would have been for a commercial or.
no,
private-
no, it's
I just didn't-
it's true. But a commercial property is making profit for
Understood.
and a public is not, right? It's not.
Understood.
It's not. So
But-
I
but
think
it
they
would-
are different.
But let's think a little bit
it
about
would- it would-
it's not just about the money, it's also about behavior,
No,
right?
but-
So
and I'm
what
going-
happens is
I'm
when
going towards that.
when you have like this idea of punishment, I don't think it's about punishment. I think it's about changing behavior. Because when you have a bylaw that says for every tree you got to pay X amount or you got to replace it, guess what I'm going to do as a developer? I want to avoid both, right? In the ideal scenario, it's a behavioral change, which says, oh, I'm going to create a footprint that's not going to take anything down because I don't want to pay for shit and I don't want to replace trees. So it's hard to say what would it have cost because in theory it would have cost nothing if the footprint would have been completely different. So any project, when you have a quote unquote a fine, it's not a punishment if you can completely avoid it, which is what happens behaviorally.
I think that's true, but I think it's also very idealistic to think that projects really work that way, that you can finagle this building around, or these types of buildings around that many trees. There's so many other complicated factors, and it's easy when you're just looking at one thing. All I'm thinking about is trees, but that's not really how the projects are just so much more complex than that. You know, so,
But Tricia, would the bylaw and the memo are saying, like, you can cut a tree if it's gonna fall on your house.
Yeah.
That's an emergency. Okay, it should be covered, logical. You could say, I think, following your train of thought, the town needs a police station because it's an emergency. You need to have a good police station, and we have to build it here. Okay, I can buy an exception for that, maybe, because it's public safety or what have you. Those are they don't come all the time. Whereas the rest of the space may be more malleable to chopping trees.
no, I agree, and I'm not trying to give any municipal project a free pass,
Exactly.
not at all what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying that there is a different, and I think we should plant a tree if we chop one down. I think that's a great idea. Sometimes, again, it's a little trickier than that, because where do you put it? You can't put it right by the road again. Well, anyway, but I'm saying there is a difference between a municipal project and a private project.
Yeah.
Though I think those are two different categories. I'm not saying that both shouldn't be responsible and look at trees carefully and be sustainable, obviously, but they are different.
I totally agree, and I'm not like dismissing it. I just have a certain aversion to regulations that just these governmental entities throw it into the public. Oh, but we are exempt.
I
don't
kind
like
of, I kind of agree with that. I do think there's a benefit to this being, hey, developers, we're not punishing you. We are putting forward a value that is actually something that is consistent with what we're doing, both public and private. I think that actually makes this stronger if we can figure out a way to do it. I also hear Tricia's point, which is that if you have a large public project, this could be burdensome, potentially, for a large public project. And so maybe the trick to making it apply to both public space and private space is to make the public space contained, like of a certain size, right? So public projects of what we would consider to potentially not be burdensome for a public project. And there's got to be some definition of that we can think about based on what it might be reasonable, right? So there should be a compromise there.
I think there should be some kind of, and this could be a true maybe it's already in here, but it could be true across the board, of a kind of application of a waiver in a sense. Like if one of the public projects had gone through and proven their case that we looked at these 5 different sites, but this is the best one because of these other important reasons, or whatever it is. It could be a private project too that said, look, I tried to do this and there's nothing, I'm trying to do the best that I can, but this is just a difficult situation. That there's a compromise in there somewhere. There's a way that it can be analyzed instead of, nope, this is what the bylaw says, pay up, man.
I love the way you said it, because if the law applies to the municipality equally, so does the waiver. Fair?
Right.
So I think that is probably a good avenue to say, the town is not exempt, the town needs to be just
Well,
as
this might
responsible
explain
as-
why most bylaws don't do both. Because once you start opening it up for public flexibility, you have to open it up for private flexibility.
Well, but isn't
So
a site plan review or a special permit flexibility is included there, is judgment?
I personally think sticking to my level of comfort is site plan approval to me covers public projects. And so I, for one, think that's sufficient because it already does it. I think the second you start carving out extra public space, You're gonna have to have exceptions, which opens up a whole category of exceptions for private space.
Yep.
You're gonna open up a can of worms.
But I think that's what Marcelo was saying, that they're the same. And so if there's a waiver that anyone, public or private, can make a case that says, hey, my situation is, I'm a developer, right? And I'm going to come in here, I want to put this, but my situation, I have a lot of trees, but my situation's a little different. Let me explain it, what's going on here. Like, these trees are 2 feet apart from each other, and so I have all these trees, but the trees can't even grow. They have no canopy, right? There has to be a means to explain a situation that's not just black and white on paper, because almost nothing's that simple, right?
I mean, that's true, but I don't think we're going to get to language a waiver that's going to be adequate to protect. I mean, when developers don't see black and white, they think it doesn't apply. I work for a construction company, right? We respect black and white, and when it's not, it's like, I probably don't have to do that, right? And they're not, I mean, it's going to be very, very, very difficult to write a waiver that's going to be meaningful to actually get a tree bylaw.
Well, it's not like you write it in the bylaw. It's saying that you have to come in front of this, a board that will decide your fate for you.
So are there
But if there's
waivers?
no,
Hold on.
but if there's no parameters for that, I mean, that
So-
feels like, that's a throwaway thing,
So
I'm just saying.
we seem to be interested in comparisons to other communities. Do other communities do some kind of special waiver where you can come in and sort of argue with the bylaw?
See, it's a great question, and I'm gonna say no, but in defense, not in defense, but is there, to further conversation, I look at the other bylaws, especially in I'm gonna say Wellesley and Arlington's, because I think those are the closest communities to us, is that their bylaw was adopted to defend against the tear down, right? And when I read their bylaws, nothing to me screams commercial development, subdivision development, right? So I think we're kind of forging our own road here without cutting down any trees. I think we're trying to forge our own road to kind of make this hybrid blend, right? To make it Ashland, right? And I think I think it's very good. I think it's gonna be difficult, but I think at the end of the day, we'll probably get a bylaw that fits our community a little bit better than just saying, hey, let's just steal one from another community and try to make it us. You know what I mean? I mean, try to kind of, just make it or fit it into the bylaws, because at the end of the day, if we do that, it's not gonna get us to our goal, which is really against the commercial, the commercial development, right? And so that's my answer, I would say, in a nutshell. Long-winded answer.
Thinking about how to get a tree bylaw through and pass town meeting, I think the things that the community is going to care about is exactly that. It's not the tear down. We don't have the same objectives, right? This community is very concerned about, large developments, a ton of construction, clearing large parcels. And so I think like a clean, very clear, as clean as possible, as straightforward as possible bylaw is how we get this through town meeting, where we say to people like this is the purpose. We are not saying that if your house was built in 1961 and you want to clear trees for an addition that you need to, this does not apply to you. This applies to, a far-flung situation where, there's going to be a gigantic development and clear
Well,
cutting.
except site plan approval covers public projects that have a site plan approval. So I think we have to figure out if for public projects, we're going to create some sort of special exception. I, for one, am strongly against it. I don't think any kind of special exception is necessary. I think that the spaces we have that are public, where there's trees, I think there's enough community value and interest in trying to protect them that it's worth the quote-unquote burden. I personally think that that's worthwhile for town meeting discussion. I'm comfortable handing that over to the people of Ashland, and if the people of Ashland say, hey, no, we don't want public properties to be impacted, then we're going to have a problem passing this. But I believe that should be not my decision or the planning board's decision, but a town meeting decision.
No, I agree. When I'm saying I think we need a very clean, straightforward, simple proposal, I would say I lean against sort of the waivers or the exceptions for that reason. My thought is that if we say to people, here's this great, you know, public policy that we want to deter sort of these very, very large developments and this clear cutting of what's left in our community, but here's this waiver, I think that's not going to go over quite as well.
I think it's not a waiver, it's a special permit, right? And I think that's the way it's not a quote unquote waiver, it's a subdivision waiver, but it would be a special permit, which is a higher burden. And I think within that, you could break out, if you did decide to go that route, you could break out elements of what you could limit the possibilities, you know? And so I think you can kind of flesh that out and,
Yeah.
you know, I know you guys haven't asked my opinion, so I'm not gonna give it on this one, but if you do, I will.
Please tell us what you think.
I agree with Marcelo and Tricia that a public project or a project of a scale is, look, if something's coming in, it's a big development, right? The town is gonna reap new growth taxes, right? I wouldn't want to stymie a development, right? Because of a development that's going to be well planned, that's going to replace a number of trees, and it's going to give the community new growth and new growth opportunities for a number of years, right? By short-sighting myself and saying, you know what, I can't, you know, I'm not going to work and I'm not going to do business. I'm not going to work with you, right? And I'm not going to work with you in your financing package, right? To allow you to move forward with the development of a large-scale construction that has a very well thought-out landscaping plan with implementation of trees throughout, to kind of say, hey, this, I'm not gonna, you know, I'm gonna apply this to
So,
100%.
I appreciate the political kind of or policy view, but as a town resident, I disagree. I think that ultimately there's more to development than tax revenue. And development reflects community values. Development reflects the purpose of this bylaw, the way it's drafted. It's very much consistent with net zero, with our values in Ashland to move us towards a more sustainable future. And if we continue to kind of prioritize tax funding over those issues, we're going to have bigger problems. There is an expense and a financial cost to not caring about sustainability or trying to weigh tax money over that. So there's got to be a different way to approach this, and it's not one versus the other.
Yeah, I'm not worried about anything about like that today. I think we can go through and create a bylaw, like you said, that is simple and straightforward. I'm just saying that whenever you start to look at things in a vacuum, and I chair the sustainability committee, right? Like I get the things that we're looking for there, but you can never look at any of those things in a vacuum. It's not real. It doesn't work that way. So no matter how you want to go charging in to save the world with this particular thing, I look at my house, right? I'd love to put solar panels up in my house, but I got to cut down some of those damn trees first, right? Because they shade my roof, right? So there's which one's better, which one's more important, which one's better for the earth, which one's better for the environment. No one can give you that answer, right? So even that very simple example, it's just more complicated than that. So it's okay, right, to kind of put for something very straightforward, but I'll always assume that there's going to be something coming up that someday, not around the corner, that's going to question the validity of that and the approach that was taken.
So this
But I
is
mean,
where
can't you
the
kind of say
solution
that
is in
about
the money. The solution is
yeah.
in the money. You've got to make it financially viable so that it changes behavior rather than quote unquote punishes, right? And so there is a compromise there where as long as our mitigation costs and replacement is flexible, we can find a medium that our community where we are valuing both. We're valuing the value of moving towards net zero, and at the same time, we're not being overly burdensome on reasonable development, right? So there is a way, and the way is right here. I think we're going to want to be more like Wellesley and make this more affordable for developers. I think we're going to want to be really flexible so that replacing trees is easy.
Richard, did you want to? I assumed you would come to the mic if you wanted to speak. Oh, you're definitely allowed to speak. Anyone's always allowed to speak.
I have so many points on this.
Well, Oh, well, come up to the mics.
think I can piece it all together.
Well, come up and say the things that you are most forefront in your mind, the top, whatever you want to do the top of. I'm sorry that you didn't think that you could speak.
You're gonna have to speak.
To come up to the mic,
microphone
though.
Just to, and I just want to make sure everyone knows that this memo was to just provide color, background, to at least get the conversation rolling, how it has, so.
Great work.
Sorry, Avery.
I have a question. I'm a little confused when you're talking about these public buildings that are on large properties. I don't know what the setbacks are in a case like that. And we're only covering the setbacks, right? We're not saying
No.
anything about cutting trees in the middle.
Setbacks is just for subdivision. The site plan approval would be any site plan approval site.
So it would cover the entire site?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Yeah, I had to think about
But
that.
I'm reading this, site plan approval means the whole shebang. Am I wrong, Peter?
No, I agree, I concur, I
Yeah.
concur.
So, and I would like it to be that way, unless you're saying that's a bad idea.
No, I just didn't, I wasn't aware, so I haven't given it any thought.
I figured site plan approval means, we'll pick one recent one, this one that we have today. Their entire site, right now, must have a bunch of trees. The whole thing, all of it would be covered. That's my reading of it.
I would concur, and it would be the entire site, you know, I think.
I think that's the whole idea. That's the only way to prevent clear cutting. Otherwise, you're only preventing it around a little section. So if the purpose is clear cut prevention, there's no other way to do it other than site plan approval that applies to the entire chunk.
Okay. I'm going to throw out something that has not been discussed at all. That's just like, I'm just throwing out something weird. What would you think about having a clause that says that clear cutting is prohibited, and then you have to define clear cutting, so you have to pick a percentage of a heavily wooded lot that would be, you know, that you would find acceptable? There actually are a couple bylaws that do that.
I mean, I like that a lot because I think it makes it very fair and simple, and it makes it not so personal. Like, oh, this size, not this size, this kind of project, not this kind of project. It makes it a lot more consistent with the greater purpose, which is clear cutting. So I personally like that approach, but I haven't seen that draft.
I didn't think it would go over well, so it's just been floating in my mind and not down in words.
I think it's great,
I mean,
it simplifies it.
I think it
so,
makes it
yeah.
very fair because it's like, our purpose is to avoid clear cutting. We don't really care what kind of project it is. Here's a percentage that we like. Unless you want to start defining percentages for subdivisions or this or
So
that.
were you saying that like, okay, here's my lot, it's covered with trees, the percentage is 25%. I'm allowed to cut 25% to put my building or my house or anything after that, I'm going to have to go through this. Is that what you're saying? I'm just trying to
No.
understand. No.
Well, I haven't thought it out completely. I mean, I wouldn't let go of what we have, because I think, for example, in a subdivision, I think it's really important that the setback areas remain wooded, because people like to have privacy between their homes.
Yeah, I'm just
right?
trying to understand what it is can you repeat that again, what you said then? About the percent?
Well, I was thinking that there would be a separate clause that would say a certain percentage of a heavily wooded area must be retained, and it might be 25%, it might be 35%.
Yeah, sorry, I was thinking the opposite. 25% could be cleared, and that
Well,
would be
I'm saying
75%
it
retained.
could go either way,
Yeah.
depending on what you decide is appropriate.
So essentially, we would look at Ashland, we would pick areas we have left, and we would say, we would define what clear cutting means. A certain percentage means clear cutting. That's what we're trying to prevent. And so if your lot has this many, if your lot is this much full, it's almost like a little table. If your lot is this much full, we want to protect this piece so that we retain and we prevent clear cutting. It's almost like a mathematical formula. We've got 100 trees we want to protect, so clear cutting means cutting 80% of them. So if your project cuts 80%, you can't do that, essentially.
I think we're getting to the point where, given the time, that we need to wrap up, for the evening. So what comes next with this? It'd be interesting to at least understand if you've come across one of these bylaws that it's a percentage. Now that we're kind of getting into the weeds with this method, to understand the percentage method, if that's, just if there's an example you have, or.
Is there a recording from this discussion?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'd like to watch the recording and get all my notes down and share them with you.
Okay. Yeah.
There are
I mean,
many
I was
things
gonna
I could
suggest
comment
that
on.
these points in this memo are really helpful, and if we as a planning board can kind of come up to some sort of consensus as to where we are in each point, I think that would be beneficial, so that if you end up working with this draft, you at least have some closure on a few issues.
I think hearing your thoughts tonight was super helpful to me to understand more of what your positions are. Yeah, so I think
So,
it's very helpful.
And I mean, that it does affect us, but it's really the community. We're just trying to get the best that we think can pass, right? But I also, I'm going to say this again about timeline, right? This is spring 24. I think everyone loosely agreed to that that's what we want. And so we really are talking no later than March to have something by the time of the public hearing process about that to be prepared. So
I agree.
So we do need to talk about work plan and dates and like expectations to get there.
Well, what format could I respond if I put together?
Can I propose like something for the planning board? Like, to me, I don't know why we can't just kind of try to reach some consensus on this stuff. Like, I, for one, would be happy with 10. I'd love 6, but I think 10 will pass, or 8. Either 8 or 10, as far as size, should pass at town meeting.
Can I ask you why you think that people at town meeting would be so concerned about the size of the tree?
Because I think, to the point of expense to the developers, I think that in Ashland will have a lot of weight. I think Ashland cares about trees, but also wants to try to be friendly to some development. So I think the size thing is going to relate to how burdensome this is for development. So although I would love 6, I think Ashland is probably going to land somewhere between 8 and 10. That's my perspective.
I don't think we need to reach consensus on that kind of detail tonight. I don't think it's just getting too late. I think you can write a bylaw that has 6, 8, 10, and we'll circle the right one when we decide what it is, right? If that's the method we're going to use. So I'm not sure we can, I think it's too late that we're getting to any point of consensus. It sounds like you're like, I got a lot of information to digest here.
Yeah. But how should I present my responses to you?
I think you should modify the bylaw according to, working with Peter or whatever, to keep modifying the bylaw according to what you think you are hearing from the planning board and what you believe, right? I think it's all about modifying the bylaw and modifying the bylaw.
But there were things that you raised that there are answers to that you don't know.
I don't think it's that complex to say that there
seems
seems to be,
but
I heard consensus somewhat that we want to value the trees, but also find a way to be flexible with developers. And there seemed to be nodding when I mentioned the idea of keeping the replacement cost low, like Wellesley or below, and making it super easy to replace and plant trees, to kind of be very flexible with the definition of what replacement a tree is.
Okay, I have to say one thing.
Yep.
So this thing about punishment, it's a deterrent. So developers take down trees that they don't need to take down because it's easier. So that monetary value is a deterrent for them to leave the trees that don't need to go.
So again, unless the planning board as a whole thinks that we should go forward and still try to reach some kind of consensus on things, I personally think I'm going to leave it to Margie and Peter. I'll put
Samantha and I can work.
to take the comments here and take it the next step forward, which may not be perfectly in consensus yet, but we'll get there. So
And would it be possible for you to make a list of the issues that you think really need to be discussed and share that with me? Based on what you've read.
Yeah, I think so. Maybe we can summarize something and pass it around to the board to give responses back to Peter. I keep playing with this thing. to make sure everything's included on that list that we thought was important. So we'll do our thing to get information to Peter, and he'll get it to you.
Okay,
So,
all right.
okay.
Thank you.
And please make sure you let us know you want to speak next time. I'll try to be more aware. I get tired this time of night and don't do so good. Okay, so thank you, Margie. We will make progress. All right, so where are we? Reports on planning board topics. Please tell me, Peter, that you have nothing for item 6.
Yeah, I have nothing for item 6.
Thank you. Not to influence anybody. Reports from board members and town planner. Comprehensive plan, we have something on that.
I think that there is a PowerPoint presentation that was presented by the consultant at the steering committee meeting, which Peter passed around, which summarizes the public engagement plan.
It's printed out and everyone's behind it.
So that's
It's
in
on the
binder?
open page. Yeah,
Yes.
if you open up the binder, it's on your left, it's on your,
Yep, so that's
the right-hand side.
the most current update. As you recall, there was a joint meeting with the select board where we had a discussion about the role of the planning board members, myself and Kate, relative to the project management team. Following that meeting, I did reach out to the project management team and requested a meeting. I did not get a response, although Tricia responded, and that correspondence is somewhere in here. So all I will say is I think that we're at a crossroads in a way where I believe my interpretation and Kate's interpretation of the next step may be very different from Tricia's, and probably from the select board members who are on the project management team. I kind of took the last conversation to mean that we're going to get together and try to kind of have an adult conversation and work through it. That's not happening. I think at this point, I just have to kind of think about whether, what the right way forward is, because there seems to be such a disconnect between the different views that I'm having a hard time seeing what a potential compromise would look like.
I think, and obviously we just have the planning board here, not the select board, so they can't comment on it. But I thought the conclusion at the end of that meeting was that, and I certainly don't want to get into a lengthy conversation here, but that we voted to maintain the current document, which says that the steering committee is driving the effort, that the steering committee is talking to the consultant, and the steering committee is guiding the project management team. So I think that was what was decided on and voted, that structure still seemed valid to the majority of the voters at that meeting. Marcelo and Deepa, you were there. Was that, what did we agree on that night?
Yeah, I think that's what we all heard, but after reading Anna's email that you just forwarded, I personally could not understand what was the intent of that meeting. Were we looking to progress the comprehensive plan as a project team, or were you planning to set up a meeting to again discuss what we discussed?
So I was under the impression that we simply agreed that the prior document stood. I did not sense that we actually decided what the interpretation of that document was. And I was under the impression that we would continue to have that conversation to figure things out. That's how I heard it. So there seems to be some disconnect there. I didn't think we voted for an interpretation. I thought we voted to keep the document as is.
That's what I was reading the document word for word. That's why I think it's a little confusing.
I totally agree. I personally, I can't believe we're still talking about this. That's just my view. I think during that meeting, there was an acknowledgement of a procedural set of mistakes that were going to not be repeated in the future. And we ended the meeting saying that the document gives the steering committee clearly declarative the lead on the process, and then the project management team will work with them under that leadership in whatever, for the purposes of the comprehensive plan. To be honest, I don't know. I don't have a difficulty reading that document and seeing a problem.
I think where the gap is, the steering committee and the consultant and the project management don't know who the leader is at this point, who's leading this whole thing, and I think that's where, I don't think the steering committee understood that project management is their support system, and anytime they need something, project management is right there to kind of help them solve it in between the meetings that we're talking about. I personally came out of that meeting with a little concern that the project management team should have been there to have a health check on the steering committee because of some things that we heard there about how somebody has a loud voice and some people are quietening down. It just defeats the whole purpose of having 28 people in a steering committee if people are being quietened down. And I personally think the consultant should be reached out to make sure that this whole division of labor is helping her reach her target. Otherwise, this is going to be another 5-year project if we derail that consultant without being the right support system. So feels like there is that challenge because I think the project management team is wearing 2 hats and they're coming to the table. The whole idea of the project management team for me is you come into the table with expertise, but that time you're not a planning board member or a select board member, but you're coming to the table with expertise and what the town needs to get this comprehensive plan to the finish line. But I think there seems to be struggle of power going on with the project management team, which is not helping anybody.
Yes, I mean, there's only been one meeting of the steering committee since the meeting on the 15th, and that was exactly the next day, the next evening, right? So of course, these problems cannot be sorted out in that kind of time frame. So, and then of course we had the holiday, so I'm still hopeful that I think we just need a little bit more time for these things to hopefully iron out, but that is sticking with the document that was voted on, and I think that was clear.
But having said that, this is the second email generated from Anna last 3 months trying to set up a meeting and not having a response from 50% of that project management feels a little disrespectful at this point, right?
It is. I think the problem,
We talked about communication, so.
communication should be the thing. I think that the problem is that the initiation of the meeting, if there is one, according to the document, should be coming from the steering committee if they need a meeting to happen, is how I would read that document.
I think we can move on, but I just wanted to say, the request that Anna sent, I left the meeting thinking that it was exactly what was supposed to happen. People said I think it was Deepa said the consultant should be. So I was pretty taken aback when there was like, so I don't know. We are at a not great place about it, for sure.
What was that discussed the next night?
You read the email and it was very simple. I honestly thought that's exactly what we were directed to do after the meeting.
I think the bottom line, I think arguing about the document is sort of, we're past that point. What I will say is, 2 things jump out at me from what I'm hearing. One is the word power struggle, I think is a really powerful, important comment that resonates with me as something I'm reflecting upon. And I have to say, I'm not sure I'm the right person at this point to continue in that role because of that term. And so I'm contemplating kind of how to react to it because I was taken aback by the lack of response, and that has a lot of significance to the health of the project. And I certainly would not want to be, how do I phrase it the right way, in the way of the success of the project. And so at some point, I think myself, and I can't speak for Kate, has to reflect upon what's the significance of this after that meeting and how to properly react to it. So as an update, I wanted you guys to be in the know of what's in my mind. What's in my mind is I'm trying to figure out how to move forward so that I can be a productive planning board member. I can support the comprehensive plan, which has been key to me running for this position on the planning board. That was one of my key reasons that I wanted to be on the planning board, to make sure that happened. And I'm trying to figure out, you know, how to be part of that project in a way that's consistent with what I recall voting for more than a year ago. And I do disagree with Tricia's interpretation of that past document. I think there's a very strong sentence in there about data and the role of the project management team. And I think whatever disagreements there are could have been resolved by a response to this email. So it's about trust. The trust has to happen both ways. There has to be some trust of Kate and Anna, and there has to be some trust of the steering committee, and there has to be some trust of town staff and of the consultant, and we all need to kind of be adults. And I thought this was an adult thing to do. So if there's a disconnect as a result of that, maybe I'm not the right person to be in that current role. That's kind of where my brain is at, and I'm sharing that.
No, I think, when I read this, I was like, I would have expected that you would have gotten a response, that's what we talked about last time. It was all about communication and the lack of communication. And if you say that you did not get a response to this email, which feels like, we talked about it, and I'm also curious about these recipients of this email. So is that how the project management team has been communicating?
Yes, the project management team is that email right there, the comp PMG. Project management team, yep, is the entire project management team. And the chairs, and then Rob and Patricia. And obviously my suggestion was, hey, let's all be adults. This is my understanding of what the meeting was about.
Yeah, and I think, and I don't think you should take this personally, because I think it's not XYZ the problem, it's all the members having the same issue. So I think you're wanting to scale back, it's a different story, but I think it's just not you, right?
I think that what's more important is less personality and more the fact that this town needs a comprehensive plan process. And we need to move beyond these, what I would call petty disagreements. If we're not able to be adults and actually communicate openly, then there's a serious level of distrust. It does feel personal because you wonder who's being distrusted, right? But I think we need to move past it, which is why at this point, I no longer want to consider whether it's personal or not. I want to put the comprehensive plan first and figure out how to move past this, because I don't think anybody wants to spend 2 years in this kind of dynamic.
I think it's really about, when we talk about empowering, that's really about empowering the two co-chairs who are the head of the steering committee, and they are the ones that should be leading this effort. And I'm not sure yet, given that they are so new, that they fully understand that they are the leaders of this movement. They are communicating with the consultant. They are guiding the project management team. And that power was given to them by the steering committee as a whole. So I think maybe it has been confusing for them to have this project management team, and then they're the chairs of the steering committee. Well, who is talking to the consultant, right? It is that kind of line of communication. So I think when I got this email, it was very much like, we just talked about this last night. This is not what was supposed to happen. This is not in the authority of the... I know you two obviously had completely the opposite view of what I came off with, that this is not the role of the project management team to call a meeting and invite the consultant and the chairs to it. That's opposite of what should be happening. And so that's where I was with this. So to me, it was a very surprising email to receive, when I would have been waiting for that to come out of the chairs to, to direct that. But I'm not sure, like I said, I'm not sure they're empowered yet to understand that that is their role.
And I think that's what I thought the kind of agenda of this meeting was, that she was asking, right? I think people needed to understand their roles, and that's why Anna's email really clearly invites all those members to the table. Let's talk about it, which I feel should have been the natural next step, because I don't think the steering committee co-chairs feel like they have the power. And we had a long discussion that night, and I don't think that would have been like okay, I'm the leader of this 40 people, I'm getting out from there. I don't think anybody would have concluded that. The two co-chairs definitely did not think the discussion was project management that night, because they had their own list of steering committee challenges, which I think it's really important to get a health check. But again, I'm just surprised. I'm sorry, Anna, you're going through this.
Did you think that meeting would have been an opportunity to empower the two chairs and to set the line of communication in
Yeah, I
the?
think she's invited the co-chairs and the consultant, which is the right thing to do, and then talk with the project management, right? To clear the whole thing, to make sure that who's setting the agenda. This is what we have from this document that we approved way back. I don't know if the consultant knows this kind of that.
I'm not sure either.
Hierarchy,
Yeah.
so.
That's a great point. But I think all of it is right. Yeah, and as I said before, I think I don't want to start assuming why people didn't answer or not, because I don't know. I'm not in their heads. I think we came out of that meeting, but there was a lot of discussion and different people with different viewpoints, which is normal. A very harsh kind of bump on the road that originated all this. The goal, I thought, in the meeting was to go over that. Maybe, just maybe, it was just a matter of timing. We come out of this meeting late. I don't remember the time, but it was late. There was a heated discussion. Some people wanted to get rid of the project management. We ended up voting to keep in the document as it was. The next meeting was exactly the following day. So to me, in terms of timing, if there is this concern, because the first thing I want is that Kate and Anna are successful on helping this process, because we all believe it's important. But maybe if at that meeting, just one day after, during the discussion, I don't know if it's the way it goes.
It was not on the agenda, so.
Could it be?
You mean on
put
the
in
steering
agenda?
committee?
Yeah, I'm saying.
I think we were within the public meeting law. There was no way
Okay.
that could have been added.
Then it could have been added for the next one. I'm just saying that, to me, the process that would de-escalate this discussion would have been, okay, we agreed, we voted for keeping things the way they are. Please, let's put in the agenda as soon as possible to discuss these leadership of the steering committee and whatever. But before the opportunity for that to happen, this email was sent as, it seemed to me that maybe it was taken as protracting and going back into the discussion that we had the night before. Maybe. I don't think the email there's anything wrong with it. And I wish they had been answered to say, let's put it on the agenda for the next meeting, right? I think it's better, and I totally sympathize on how Anna is feeling, because it touches you personally by default. But I think with the idea of moving this forward and making this successful, that step still not unattainable. We still can, that conversation still can happen. It just, yeah, the email was not responded. Okay, if we get past that for a second and say, okay, how can we make that happen? I would say, let's get this conversation on the steering committee and empowering their leaders. I totally agree. As soon as possible. It's a tough beginning, but I don't think we need to take a lot more than what the facts are, even though they are difficult at times to get. I don't think this is like an end of the road. I think this whole thing is the beginning of that road. And I wish that maybe the leaders in the steering committee take it that way, so that moving forward, Anna and Kate are always consulting when appropriate, and everybody has the right to put things on the agenda, which was one of the other concerns, if that's not happening for whatever reason. But the only stage where that is going to be successful is there. I think maybe the email was not the stage that the other people were hoping, even though it was well-intentioned. And that's that.
I think that makes sense. I think that explanation makes a lot of sense.
15 days is a lot of time to not respond to this email, which talks about first week of December meeting, which I think, I understand. I mean, if you said it on 16th, we probably had a meeting on 14th or 13th or whatever that time date was. But 15 days, it's a lot of time not to respond to the email, which I personally don't agree. I would have felt offended if I was in their place, because this is the second one to have not put their meeting
Well,
on the agenda.
I think this is, though, I mean, and we're just going to get to meeting minutes in it, but I think this is it's indicative of the culture of the project management group from the beginning, right? And the whole group, I'm not talking, and so, yeah. So it's not like those that's going to change between that Wednesday night meeting and a Thursday morning email. So I think we should wrap that up here. I think, yeah, we're getting late. I don't have any other updates that need to be made before the meeting minutes. Do you have anything else that needs to be? Chase
No,
Bank, do you need to mention that, or?
No, it's on the agenda. I think I sent it out. I think I sent the link to all the material. Something we cannot discuss tonight, but obviously Chase Bank is submitted to take over the space of Mozzie's Restaurant.
I'm sorry, who was that?
Chase Bank.
To take over Mozzie.
Mozzie's is closing.
Mozzie's would be closed.
Okay.
Sad but true.
It's Mozzie. Yep. Yep.
So there's a application pending now for,
It's been submitted. We're going to open on December 14th. It's for site plan review to change a use, triggered by change of use. And we'll be reviewing the site plan for that application. But all application materials online, and just kind of give you a heads up on what's going on out there. So other than that, I think I can skip all other updates.
All right. Anyone else have any updates that need to take place tonight? Did you have one, Amanda, from the?
I was gonna say, the regional collaborative met this morning, and it was a really great meeting. I think I don't want to take a ton of time tonight, but the substance of the meeting was on MBTA communities, and it was all the towns went sort of through where they stand and the approach that they're taking. Lots going forward at Springtown meeting, so I think we'll have some data points. Also, lots of good information about resources that the collaborative has to assist, and it's everything from like assessing, options for locations and looking at your existing zoning to preparing for town meeting. I mean, it's really like soup to nuts, the assistance that they say that they can provide, and they've indicated they're working with a number of communities. So there's a lot of great resources available. They're going to circulate a deck, and I can certainly send that across to everybody from what they presented today.
Great, thank you. All right, meeting minutes from October 12th. I think the changes I have are pretty simple, yeah.
What tab was that on?
Oh,
I had it under, I still had it on tab
I
1.
still don't know my full name. That's how many more alphabets I have.
I
Oh,
just
boy.
go over to Trish's thing and she started like, oh,
Circle
you
deep,
got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Line 33, Greaves is missing an
anyone-
S.
You
Well,
have
because I
lines,
do have an
actually?
edit, but it would be
I printed
helpful
it out on my own.
if I had them.
Need a bit of write on it.
It's before. Okay, so the clerk report, I don't remember saying that. I know I occasionally bungle it a little bit, but I tell you, but I literally went and listened to it. So the second sentence of that should just be struck, because the only thing I said was there were 4 public correspondents. I'm not sure how that got in there, but
Sometimes I think they
yeah,
start from old meeting
probably,
minutes.
yeah. But I did listen to it, so.
Oh, and then I think in the very last, what was the last page? Line, it's a small thing but line 125, and maybe it was the way it was said, but Mr. Zucker pointed that the 2 co-chairs were appointed, but that should be elected, I assume. Right. And then under 100 Chestnut Street, it talks about the mural applications, which should be under Starbucks. And that's all I have.
Does anyone else have any changes? I'll make a motion to accept or approve the October 12th, 2023 minutes with the changes proposed.
I'll second.
Roll call vote.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey guy.
Tricia Kendall, aye. So if that's approved, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn at 10:45 PM.
And a second?
Second that.
Roll call vote.
Deepa Venkatai.
Anna Tesmanitsky, aye.
Marcelo Hona, aye.
Catherine Jersey guy.
Amanda Hayes, aye.
And Tricia Kendall, aye. So we are adjourned. How many are there? 3. Oh.
You know John Hancock?
What's that?